Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So glad to be here with all of you. It's going to be a great stream tonight. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. We're going to have a great conversation. I'm very excited about it. We're going to have some fun times. We're going to talk about some interesting things. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell, and away we go. And away we go.
Of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Hey, folks. Welcome, 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 welcome. So, I'm glad to be here with you all tonight. It is Monday evening. I'm in my lovely Brooklyn apartment, not the same lovely Brooklyn apartment that I used to be in, a new lovely Brooklyn apartment. I'm sitting here in front of the old bookshelf, and we're going to have a live stream. We're going to have ourselves a live stream. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Be sure to crush that subscribe button because people are getting unsubscribed. That's how the algorithms work, especially when you're a dissident. So make sure to crush the subscribe button. Be sure to crush the notifications bell so you get notified the next time we do one of these, because if you don't know we're doing it, it's very important. If you want to take the time to tweet this out, let people know this live stream is happening, that would be a cool thing to do. Put this on Reddit, put this on Facebook, put this on your Twitter, on your Instagram, on your TikTok. Good times, folks. Good times. Now, the way this works, for those of you who may not be familiar with our format here, is that I give my opening remarks. And those are just some prepared comments I'm ready to make. Sometimes it's a formal speech. Sometimes it's just me talking about the news. Sometimes it's something that's on my mind. I give my opening remarks. While I'm giving my opening remarks, the whole time I am writing down super chat questions that come in. So if there's something you want me to talk about, by all means, send me a super chat question. Shoot me a super chat. I will write it down. I will write down your super chat question. And then in the second half of the show, I will answer your super chat question. That's the way that it works. I answer your super chat questions. And after I answer the super chat questions, they come after the roll call. So after I finish my opening remarks, first we have the opening remarks while I'm writing your super chats down. And I'm giving my opening remarks. Then after that, I do the roll call. We find out who is on the other side of the camera, names and locations. Then after that, I answer super chat questions for the rest of the night. And it is your super chat questions that make the second half of the show awesome. Sometimes the second half of the show is really short. Other times the second half of the show just goes on and on and on because you guys ask the questions. Sometimes guys ask really good questions. And that gets me talking. So if you are in the mood to ask some really good questions, we can have a really good live stream tonight. So keep those super chat questions rolling in. I will answer them in the second half of the program. I will write them down as they come in. And that is how things work. So welcome, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm so glad to have you all here. If you're watching right now, you are a valued member of this community, and I'm really glad to have you all here. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell, and away we go into the opening remarks. Now, folks, many times people have asked me, Caleb, do you support North Korea? I've gotten asked that question point blank. Caleb, do you support North Korea? And the answer I always give, it took me a while to develop this answer, but the answer that I give is I say, no. I support all of Korea, not just North Korea. Korea is one country, and I support the Korean people, the people of the Korean Peninsula. I do support them, and I do recognize the horrendous things they have been subject to. Japanese occupation for decades and decades, followed by division at the hands of the U.S. imperialists, followed by a horrendous war in which genocidal bombing was carried out against them, followed by more division. Yes, I support the Korean people. I support the Korean people, and I recognize the revolutionary leadership that the Korean people have chosen, that Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il, and Kim Jong-un, the revolutionary leadership of the Korean Workers' Party. I do recognize that leadership as having something important to offer. And, when you talk about North Korea, right, people often want to get all worked up. People want to get all worked up about different issues. And you look at it, and it becomes very apparent that whenever U.S. media talks about North Korea, they have no interest in talking about the truth. They have a caricature rooted in anti-Asian racism that they roll out. Folks may not be familiar with this, but at one point, there was a widely believed racist stereotype about Asians. It was called Asiatic despotism. You can actually Google the phrase Asiatic despotism. And it was believed that people in Asia are just not civilized like we white Europeans are. And people in Asia, they just don't have it in them to have human rights and freedom and democracy. They're barbarians. They're primitive people that just don't understand human rights, and they are just racially different. It's in their blood to be authoritarian and barbaric, etc. This was very widely believed, this concept of Asiatic despotism. Right, this is very widely believed, and it is an old racist trope, and this racist trope is well embedded in U.S. culture. For example, at the time that Stalin was building up the Soviet Union and its 5-year economic plans, the New York Times reporter who was stationed in Moscow wrote about Stalin in racist terms and talked about how Stalin was from Georgia, how Russia was more like Asia than Europe, how Stalin was an Asiatic ruler, and he used authoritarian Asiatic methods to rule over his people. Walter Duranty, who wrote marveling things about the Soviet Union's economic achievements, also insisted the Soviet Union wasn't communist. It was an Asiatic regime. This is the way they spoke about it. And Trotsky, Leon Trotsky, he, in the very first page of his biography of Stalin, I think I might have a copy of that here. The very first page, I kid you not, the very first page. I have it right here. This is Trotsky's biography of Stalin. Stalin, an appraisal of the man and his influence by Trotsky. And what does it say? What does it say on the very, very first page? Chapter 1. Chapter 1, Family and School. This is chapter 1 of Leon Trotsky's biography of Stalin, Family and School. It says, this is the very first paragraph of the book, mind you. This isn't just a passing remark. This is how Trotsky opens his biography of Stalin. He writes, the late Leonid Krasin, an old revolutionist, eminent engineer, brilliant Soviet diplomat, and above all, an intelligent human being, was the first, if I'm not mistaken, to call Stalin Asiatic. In saying that, he had in mind no problematic racial attributes, but rather that blending of grit, shrewdness, craftiness, and cruelty which has been considered characteristic of statesmen of Asia. But manifestly, in order to draw attention to his cruelty, Bukharin subsequently simplified the appellation, calling Stalin Genghis Khan. This is anti-Asian racism. Stalin himself, in a conversation with a Japanese journalist, once called himself Asiatic, not in the old, but rather in the new sense of the word, with the personal illusion that he wished to hint at the existence of common interests between the USSR and Japan against the imperialist West. Contemplating the term Asiatic from a scientific racism. There you go. From a scientific viewpoint, we got scientific racism via Trotsky. From a scientific point of view, we must admit that in its instance, it is partially correct. Geographically, the Caucasus, especially Transcaucasia, is undoubtedly a continuation of Asia. The Georgians, however, in contradistinction from Mongolian Azerbaijanis, belong to the so-called Mediterranean European race. Thus, Stalin was not exact when he called himself Asiatic. But geography, ethnography, and anthropology are not all that matters. History looms larger. A few spatters of human flood that has poured for centuries from Asia into Europe, can you get more racist than this, have clung to the valleys and mountains of the Caucasus. Disconnected tribes and groups seem to have frozen there in their process of development, transforming the Caucasus into a gigantic ethnographic museum. And it goes on. This is how Trotsky's biography of Stalin begins. I just read you the first 2 paragraphs, and they're all about how Stalin's a brutal authoritarian because he's Asiatic. And that's not racist or anything. That's just like scientific. You know, I mean, this is racism. I mean, how is this not racism? How is that not racism? And this is one of the oldest racist tropes out there. I'll just stick it up here. One of the oldest racist tropes out there. Asiatic despotism. Genghis Khan. Attila the Hun. Right? This notion that Asian people are just don't believe in democracy. Just don't believe in freedom. They're authoritarian. And it gets weird because I got pumped with this when I was a kid in the early 90s. There was this weird fetish in the United States for for what do they call them? The Asian tigers. And they were telling us, I remember in school, we were always hearing about how in Taiwan and South Korea and Japan, the kids study all night long and they work so hard and we're too soft in America. We're too soft, and that was kind of pumped into our heads, right? In the 80s and 90s, there were a lot of television programs in the United States that promoted Japan or promoted, martial arts. And there was this kind of weird admiration based on this racist caricature of Asian folks, that Asian folks are just inherently authoritarian. And of course, the biggest incarnation of this kind of racism that we see in US media is when they talk about North Korea. Anytime they talk about North Korea, anytime, they make no effort to be accurate. There are many examples of this, but you used to see news stories all the time that were fake news, that were really blatantly fake news. They wouldn't even bother to fact check them. For example, I remember there was a headline in the New York Daily News a few years back. It said, North Korea believes in unicorns. That was the headline. North Korea believes in unicorns. Right? That's what the headline was. And it was all about, you're supposed to see that and go, ha ha, those idiots in North Korea, they think unicorns are real. That's retarded. If you read the article, all that it mentioned was that in North Korea, there had been an archaeological dig. And this site, this archaeological, this piece of ancient something that they had discovered, what was written on the side of the building, of the archaeological thing, it was written Tomb of the Unicorn. So no, North Korea doesn't believe in unicorns. North Korea just did an archaeological dig and discovered a tomb of the something that was labeled the Tomb of the Unicorn. But they use that, right? They just look for anything. If you want to learn the truth about North Korea, there are a number of books you can read. The leading scholar on Korea in the United States is named Dr. Bruce Cummings. And I remember he came to my university when I was in college. And I was so excited that there was an anti-imperialist, someone who'd studied North Korea. He wrote a book called Korea's Place in the Sun. He wrote another book called North Korea, Another Country. And I remember I went to Dr. Bruce Cummings' lecture. I spoke with Dr. Bruce Cummings. I got to spend some time with him. And I asked him, what about all these things we hear on TV about Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il has the world's largest collection of pornography and all this. And he said, none of that is true. He said, none of that is true. And that he frequently gets calls from ABC News, NBC, Fox, asking him to confirm these kinds of claims that, North Korea, that Kim Jong-il executes people by shooting them out of helicopters or feeding them to wild dogs, all this fake news. And they asked him, as the leading scholar in the United States, based in Chicago, about these claims. And he says he can never validate any of it. And then he asks them what their source is. And immediately, almost every time, they will tell Dr. Bruce Cummings, our source is an anonymous source within the South Korean intelligence or within the South Korean military. I'm sure they're telling the truth. But this kind of fake news they publish, right? And, when they made a film, there was a Hollywood movie about assassinating Kim Jong-un, right? I mean, can you believe this? Could you imagine if Russia or Iran or North Korea made a movie about assassinating the president of the United States? It would be a huge amount of outrage. And North Korea, a country, it's not a country, it's a country that's divided in the northern half of the Korean Peninsula. The revolutionary government on the northern half of the Korean Peninsula had a movie made by a superpower. U.S. imperialism made a movie about killing their leader at a time when they have thousands of troops stationed right on their border. They've got nuclear weapons pointed at them. It was unbelievable hostility. And that whenever U.S. media talks about North Korea, they talk about North Korea in this hysterical tone, as if everything about them is just pure evil. They have this one North Korean exile. I forget her name. And she's like a favorite of the right wing. She claims to have fled from North Korea and her life was so awful. She claims that in North Korea, the trains don't have electricity. The trains don't work. And the trains are the people have to push the trains. This is what she claims, that the trains in North Korea, people have to push the trains. I mean, that is ridiculous. Do you really believe that in North Korea, the trains don't work and the population just has to push them all the time? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, right? You think they can't run trains in North Korea? The population just has to push them all the time? That's the stupidest thing anyone's ever heard. It's ridiculous. It's just dumb. But she says it. And if you question it, if you say, are you sure they push the trains? Are you sure that? Then they say, Caleb, are you defending North Korea? That evil regime? Are you and that's how they get away with it, right? Is that they just they assume that you're supposed to just hate everything about them. You're supposed to believe that everything about North Korea is inherently evil. The entire country is just one giant prison camp, concentration camp. The people there are just brutally oppressed and brainwashed and horrifically treated, and it's all awful and horrible and it's ridiculous. There is no attempt whatsoever to try and honestly assess the country. Well, there's a few, if you dig, you can find honesty about North Korea. One book that I would really like to recommend is called Korea, Division, Reunification, and U.S. Foreign Policy by Martin Hart Landsberg. Very good book. Korea, Division, Reunification, and U.S. Foreign Policy by Martin Hart Landsberg. It's a very good book. And it talks about what's actually gone on. And there are a few good works, good publications about North Korea. You can find the truth on North Korea. You just have to dig. You have to dig for the truth because they have worked very, very hard to prevent people from knowing about it. But the reality is that North Korea is a country that has been barricaded and under attack for decades. For decades. 80 years almost 80 years, this country has been barricaded. And any country subjected to that level of constant military threat, that level of absolute genocidal war crimes, that level of economic sanctioning and warfare, any country under those circumstances is going to have to tighten up and become authoritarian. To expect that North Korea, in the conditions that North Korea is in, would be a free and open society where anyone can just do what they want is a ridiculous expectation. People forget 4 million people died in the Korean War. 4 million. 4 million people died in the Korean War. During the Korean War, the American military, they bombed every single building in North Korea above 1 story tall. Every single one. Every building above 1 story tall was bombed. And the bombers came back and they said, there's nothing left to bomb. So they sent them back and they bombed the dikes, the storm levees, and they created a flood and they drowned all kinds of people. The amount of war crimes that the United States committed in North Korea against the population was utterly horrendous. And this has all just been obscured, right? They just want to show us Team America and some cartoon of Kim Jong-il, and they want to cover up the fact that horrendous war crimes were committed. I mean, you can read about some of these horrendous atrocities where American GIs, there was a group of Korean children that were in a basement. And so they poured gasoline into this basement, and then they lit a match and burned them alive in a basement. And so many horrendous crimes were committed against the Korean people. So many horrendous crimes, so many massacres. And then on top of that, right, you have the fact that the country was divided. And actually, in the 1960s and 70s, North Korea's economic growth was very significant. And I always quote the BBC and other publications that talked about a North Korean economic miracle. They built an educational system that was very effective. They rapidly expanded their agricultural output. They electrified the whole country. They built up a steel industry. In the 60s and 70s, the growth rates in North Korea were very rapid. They had a huge amount of economic success during those years. And no one ever wants to talk about that. That's just been swept under the rug. We don't talk about that. But they had a huge amount of economic success in the 60s and 70s, even up into the 80s. Because they were part of the communist bloc, and they became kind of the Las Vegas of the communist bloc. Pyongyang was a place that a lot of high-ranking communist officials would go on vacation. It had fancy hotels and stuff like that. In the 70s, 80s, and 90s, North Korea was doing pretty well. But then the Soviet Union fell. And when the Soviet Union fell, they had a problem, which was that they could not get petroleum anymore. And they needed petroleum to run their tractors for their agricultural system. North Korea, you have to keep in mind, doesn't have very much arable land. It's mountainous. In southern Korea, you have the farms and the arable land, but they're the mountainous part of the Korean peninsula. And they worked very, very hard to develop food self-sufficiency, but they still needed petroleum. They still needed oil for their tractors. And the United States, with the control of the petrodollar and horrendous economic sanctions, prevented North Korea from getting petroleum. And so their food system came to a grinding halt. They couldn't grow their own food. And the country is subjected to horrendous sanctions on top of that. No one could trade with them. They had a huge amount of coal, but nobody could buy it. And North Korea really suffered. And millions more people died in the early 90s during what they called the Arduous March. A U.S.-imposed famine on the Korean people. And any other government would have collapsed under those circumstances. When you have a food shortage imposed on your country and your food system comes to a grinding halt, you can't import food, people are fleeing the country as refugees. It was a nightmare in the early 90s in North Korea. Any other government would have collapsed. If the Korean Workers' Party did not have the very solid loyalty of the population, if they did not have a big chunk of the population that was very, very loyal, very, very ideological, very, very communist, they would not have survived. But the fact that in the face of a man-made famine, they're always talking about, well, communism created man-made famines. The U.S. imperialists created a man-made famine in North Korea, tried to starve them out. And the fact that, in light of that, the Korean Workers' Party was able to stay in power, is nothing short of a testament to how loyal that population is. They know that the U.S. imperialists are their enemies. They know what happened the last time the American imperialists came into their homeland, and they are never going to let that happen again. And every person in North Korea has a relative, a grandfather, an uncle, a cousin who died in the Korean War. They know that it was Mao Zedong and the Chinese Red Army that rescued them, and Mao's own son died in the Korean War. Did you know that? Mao's son died in the Korean War. Writing the super chat down. Mao's own son died in the Korean War, and they were rescued by the Red Army of China. And that during the Korean War, the U.S. Army General Douglas MacArthur threatened to drop 5 atomic bombs on China and on North Korea. He threatened nuclear war against China and North Korea without even asking President Truman's permission, which is, a little known fact that's a little bit relevant if you're going to talk about the history of the country. The fact that the USA threatened to nuke them and nuke China during the Korean War. But yet, despite all of this, the Korean Workers' Party stayed in power. In the 90s, when they were facing this big crisis, they anticipated a U.S. attack. They announced that they were going to proliferate nuclear weapons. Bill Clinton made a deal with them. He sent Madeleine Albright to go meet Kim Jong-il. And Madeleine Albright met with Kim Jong-il, and she was like, he was actually an intelligent person. Who'd have thought, right? The leader of a country of 20 million people was actually an intelligent human being. Who would have guessed, right? Madeleine Albright was just shocked that, that the leader of North Korea was not a buffoon and an idiot, which he was not. He was actually a very intelligent man. Based on that, North Korea was promised all kinds of food aid, all kinds of heating gas, all kinds of oil in exchange for not getting nuclear weapons. And they got some of it, and then Congress wouldn't fund the rest of the deal. And so the deal fell through. And then Bush gave his axis of evil speech and called North Korea. He referred to North Korea as part of the axis of evil. And so at that point, North Korea proliferated nuclear weapons. Now, the world realizes that it's not good for North Korea to have nuclear weapons, right? We would like a world without nuclear weapons. However, North Korea feels that they are in danger of being overthrown. The United States rehearses all-out war with North Korea every year. Every year, they practice for an all-out war against North Korea, the war games that the USA does. Imagine if in Mexico, every year the Mexican army got together, they got thousands of soldiers, and they all ran at the U.S. border, and then they stopped. Imagine that. That is what the USA does. Every year, they practice for a war with North Korea, and they get all the U.S. military and all the airplanes, and they run right to the border, and then they stop. Now, could you imagine? Is that not a provocation? Right? I mean, that's not just practice. That's all-out war, right? I mean, could you imagine that? If on the Canadian border, they had thousands and thousands of troops and weapons and airplanes, and once a year, we just practice. Thousands of them all run at the U.S. border, but then they stop. I mean, that's a provocation. And North Korea is not okay with the USA being on their border and practicing all-out war with them every year. Okay. USA is not okay with that. North Korea is not okay with that. So in response to that, North Korea tests their missile system. Right? And they show, okay, you're going to practice for invading us. We're going to practice shooting missiles, right? And we have nukes. So in theory, if we wanted to, we could, shoot a missile with a nuke on it at you. If we wanted to, what? You're just going to practice, all out invasion of us, but not actually do it. Well, we're going to practice shooting a missile over Japan. And, it won't actually hit Japan, but we're practicing, right? This is how it works. And Tulsi Gabbard pointed out, do you remember in Hawaii, they did that horrendous horrendous mistake. I swear it was some kind of psychological experiment, right? It was some kind of sick psychological experiment that they did, but they like gave everyone in Hawaii a notice on their phone that a nuclear missile was about to hit Hawaii, and there was like mass panic, and people were like panicking, oh my god, and it was, they were it was some kind of experiment, but everyone in Hawaii got like their phone started ringing and saying there's going to be a nuclear strike. And after that, Tulsi Gabbard, the congresswoman, came out and she said, we have to negotiate with North Korea. And the U.S. position was that they would only negotiate with North Korea if North Korea completely disarmed. Well, why would they negotiate at that point, right? That's not negotiation, right? You negotiate, you start with little steps. I'll give you this if you give me this, and then I'll give you. That's not how it goes. That's not how it works. But, but the narrative from Tulsi Gabbard, of the U.S. leaders, well, we're only going to negotiate. We will only negotiate if you completely give up your weapons. And that's just not a serious attempt at negotiation. But I don't know if people remember. I mean, the situation with North Korea, right? Obama escalated with North Korea, right? We now know they made that movie, The Interview. That movie that was made that was portraying the assassination of their leader. They made this movie, The Interview. And we now know that like the State Department helped them make it. It was all planned as an intelligence operation, to attack North Korea more or less. And that this was some kind of psyop, right? And then there was like that computer attack, and they blamed the computer hacking on North Korea and all of this. And during the Obama administration, there was kind of a breakthrough. Kind of like the beginning of something was happening. Dennis Rodman, the basketball player, went to North Korea. And the Harlem Globetrotters, they went to North Korea. And there was kind of the beginning of something. While Obama was escalating, it was very clear there was another section of the deep state that was saying, hold your horses, Obama. We want to de-escalate. And Dennis Rodman went to North Korea, and the Harlem Globetrotters went to North Korea. And around that time, they made a movie called Red Dawn. Do people know about this? They made a movie called Red Dawn, which was, it was an 80s movie, right? There's an 80s movie with Patrick Swayze about Cuba and Nicaragua and the Soviet Union invading America. Well, they remade it in 2012. And instead of Cuba, Nicaragua, and the Soviet Union, they had North Korea invading America. And this shows how, again, the anti-Asian racism. Originally, the movie was about China invading America. But then whoever these dumb Hollywood producers are realized, oh, shit, if we make a movie about China invading America and Chinese troops occupying America and committing horrendous atrocities, if we do that, then we can't show that movie in China. Wow. And China actually has the biggest movie theater audience of any country in the world. And so the Hollywood producers said, oh, shit, all right, we already filmed this movie, and it portrays China invading the United States. I know, we'll Photoshop all the flags, and we'll make it about North Korea invading the United States. So they edited the movie with Photoshop, and they redid it so that it was about North Korea invading the United States. Seriously, they re-released Red Dawn, and it was about North Korea invading the United States. And it was the biggest work of hack propaganda ever. I kid you not, the trailers for Red Dawn were like, in a not so distant future, when our government has reduced military spending, some other nation was investing in military technology. Bum, bum, bum. Like, oh, wow. That's our problem in the United States. We're just decreasing military spending all the time. I mean, it was just like the most stupid thing you ever saw, right? It's like, oh my God, the USA, if we cut the military budget, next thing you know, North Korea is going to be on our doorstep. We're going to be occupied by North Korea. It was just an ugly, vile war propaganda film. So this was like the beginning of my pro-North Korea activism, because I heard about this, and I am living, at that point, I was living in the capital of capitalism in New York City. Now, New York City is the capital of capitalism. Occupy Wall Street, it happened the previous year. This was 2012. And this movie was going to be released. It was going to be in the movie theater in Times Square. So I got a group of friends together. Group of friends, people with the International Action Center, of Ramsey Clark and the Workers' World Party. And we actually protested opening day of the movie Red Dawn in Times Square. And you may not recognize me. I'm going to show you the video here, but you may not actually recognize me in this video clip because I don't look like this no more, right? I don't look like this no more. I had long hair and a beard, and with a North Korean flag, long hair and beard Caleb protested with a group of friends. Small. It was like a really small protest. Really, really small protest. We protested against the movie Red Dawn. So I'm going to pull up the video here. And, I'll show you. I'm not going to show it all to you. I'm going to show you some of it. I just want you to see this, right? Because this was a tiny protest. There was 15 people there. And there was only 15 people there because Workers' World Party had its national conference the week before. It was a tiny demonstration out on the sidewalk in front of a movie theater in Times Square. But it had a really big impact. Let's just watch some of the video. Here we go. Dum-da-dum. Dum-da-dum. Setting the stage. It's like Star Wars. Just play the Star Wars theme here.
This film, Red Dawn, is lying war propaganda. The Korean people have been under siege for the last 50 years, trying to unite their country. Kim Il-sung liberated Korea from the Japanese invaders, and they've been trying to reunite their country. This lying Hollywood film has North Korea invading the United States. That's outrageous. Right now, they're against communism.
Right. I mean, we were out there.
Everyone loves their country, but they have to live.
That's the comedian Michael Malice, by the way. He's like a famous comedian libertarian now, mind you. He goes on Fox News and stuff. We had no idea he was coming to our protest. Michael Malice, the comedian who is like a libertarian comedian, he came to our rally.
Fear because of the constant threat of U.S. attack. How do you think you would feel if you were a regular citizen and the biggest country in the world is making movies that you're going to invade? You would be terrified. And there is no sense of responsibility in the United States for what messages we're putting out there. We're the big dog, so everyone has to live in fear of us. That is the fascist way. That is not the way of peace. These people just want to live their lives, go to school, and be happy, and that is being taken away from them by us for no reason whatsoever. So long live DPRK, let them have Juche, and hopefully we'll have our version here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I appreciate everybody coming out today for this event. I want to talk about something that the other speakers haven't really talked about, and that is the anti-imperialist movement in South Korea. The South Korean people have not accepted the occupation of their country lightly. In 1968, students all over the country overthrew their government. It was known as the April Revolution. South Korea has went through a series of right-wing military dictatorships controlled by U.S. imperialism, and the people there are resisting it. Even to this day, they're resisting it. South Korea is holding an election. They will elect a new president of their country soon. One of the people that is running in this election for the Grand National Party, which is the right-wing party in South Korea, which is allied with U.S. imperialism, is this daughter of the dictator, Park Chung-hee.
Yeah. No, this was a great demonstration that we had, right? And it was provocative. It was very, very provocative.
This hate movie, it's racist, vile propaganda against the Korean people. Don't go to this movie. It's war propaganda. Read the truth. Just like they demonized colonial people all over the world. They demonized a great African leader, Gaddafi, and they tortured and they killed him. But they needed the demonization first before they occupied that oil-rich country that was doing so much for Africa. They're doing the same thing today. The people's Korea. Don't believe their lies. We need jobs, not hate. Don't go to this hate movie. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, it was a great demonstration. We had different speakers, and this woman walked out of the movie and told us this was kind of funny. This randomly happened. This woman walked out of the movie.
The people behind me, they were giggling and laughing, and I turned to them and I said, "What's so funny?" "Oh, shut the F up," they told me. So I just walked out. I mean, I was just disgusted, and I just walked out. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, but apparently that's what they want to do, is promote war. Like, we don't have other things to spend our money on.
Exactly.
Shutting schools and hospitals.
The hurricane.
Yeah. People don't even have lights, and they want to promote another day. We all work really hard.
Yeah, this woman walked out, and so then we protested the movie. We kind of soapboxed outside, and then actually we went into the movie theater. And we did like an Occupy Wall Street mic check inside the movie theater. It was pretty wild. So we'll show that.
Mic check! Mic check! Mic check! Mic check! Red Dawn is a lying war propaganda film. This is a lying war propaganda film.
So that was our demonstration, and it was very small. It was a very small demonstration, but we did it provocatively. We had the flag of North Korea. We had signs about North Korea, and it kind of put the U.S. government on notice. Like, holy shit, there are people on the island of Manhattan, in the capital of world capitalism, in New York City, that support North Korea. And, all kinds of media came and covered the protest. National Review magazine, they put it on their website. Occupy Wall Street supports North Korea. And, it created just a big deal. I mean, it was a really big deal that we did this. And it was huge. And we did it again. We did more like provocative demonstrations supporting North Korea. And we did it in a different manner. We didn't do it, in this kind of, sloppy, boring, peace on the Korean Peninsula thing. We did it in a very provocative way, right? With the North Korean flags. There were other rallies we did where we actually brought with us like photos of Kim Il-sung, like big pictures of Kim Il-sung's face. We had provocative signs. Kim Il-sung is a revolutionary hero. Wall Street runs Hollywood. We did it in a very provocative way to try and get people's attention. And it really shook people up. And that was like the first big act of activism that I did for North Korea. First big act of activism I did for North Korea. In 2013, I actually got to attend the World Festival of Youth and Students, the Communist Global Gathering in Quito, Ecuador. And while I was there, we got to meet with the Kim Il-sung Youth Organization. That's the Young Communist League, or the Communist Youth Group of North Korea. The Kim Il-sung Youth Organization met with us, and they gave me a stack of books. One of the books they gave me was actually, this is a fairly recently published book. This is the history of the revolutionary activities of President Kim Il-sung. That's what this is. Published in 2012. And you open it up, it's got a big picture of Kim Il-sung, and it is a biography of Kim Il-sung. I might read to you from that a little bit later. I might actually do some reading from this book, because this is the official biography of Kim Il-sung they published. They gave me a biography of Kim Jong-suk, who is Kim Jong-il's mother. And it was quite an interesting gathering. And the North Koreans were like the stars of the festival. They sing. And they had this choir that sang, and they were all about it. They had a whole tent set up, and they, having different ceremonies, doing traditional Korean dance. And it was really, really a beautiful moment. North Korea, let me just refute a couple myths. Okay. First things first, a lot of people look at the fact that Kim Il-sung was the founder of North Korea, right? He's like their George Washington. He's, the founder of the country. He's their Ho Chi Minh. He's their national liberation hero. And then after him, it was his son, Kim Jong-il, right? Who became the leader. Why? Why was that the case? Well, you have to look at the context. 1993, was, I believe, the year that was it 1993 or 1994 that Kim Il-sung died. And that was the year that, just a couple years before, 1991, the Soviet Union had fallen. 1989, you had a number of Marxist governments in the Eastern Bloc that fell. One of the main ways they divided and set the stage for overthrowing communist governments across Eastern Europe was by playing up this idea that the Communist Party had two wings. They had the hardliners and the moderates, or the reformers and the hardliners. And Gorbachev, he was a good communist. He was a reformer. But, Ceausescu and Enver Hoxha, they were hardliners, right? And then when Gorbachev was arrested, they said the hardliners in the party have kidnapped and arrested Gorbachev, the reformer, and that it was manipulating one wing of the Communist Party against the other. That was the main way the U.S. imperialists were able to set the stage for the color revolutions that toppled socialism in the Eastern Bloc. So in North Korea, they made a really big point of saying, look, nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. This guy, Kim Jong-il, he's just the son of Kim Il-sung. We haven't dropped Kim Il-sung's revolutionary line. We haven't abandoned Kim Il-sung's teachings. We are keeping the flame alive. And they continue that with Kim Jong-un. They're saying, look, the flame, Kim Jong-il and Kim Il-sung are still alive. They are saying we are holding on to the revolutionary line that defeated U.S. imperialism. It is symbolic. It is making a point that they are not abandoning the revolutionary principles, right? It is sending a message to the world that there is revolutionary continuity, that just like Kim Il-sung was fighting in the mountains against the Japanese, now we're here and we have our socialist country attacked by the U.S. imperialists. It is a political statement. And you have to remember that in Korea and in China, there's a much more emphasis on the family and filial piety and loyalty of children to their parents. And this is important stuff, and it has cultural implications. Right? You'll notice, for example, for a long time, the president of South Korea was the daughter of the military dictator of South Korea. No one says anything about that, right? That Park Chung-hee was the military dictator of South Korea in the 60s and 70s, and his daughter was president of South Korea, in the 2000s. And no one's like, oh my God, see, it's a monarchy. No one says that because everyone's just, it's South Korea, right? But George W. Bush, he was the son of George Herbert Walker Bush, and he was president of the United States. There are political dynasties in other countries, but in North Korea, in a country that's under attack, where they're trying to hold the party together, many people have pointed out, why do the North Koreans emphasize Juche ideology? Why is it you don't hear the North Koreans talk about Marxism-Leninism as much anymore? They study Marx and Lenin. They admit, their history is as a Marxist-Leninist party. Why don't they talk about Marxism-Leninism? Why do they emphasize the Juche ideology? Well, they do that because they want to make clear that there are no factions in the party. During the Cold War, the North Korean government, sometimes it was aligning with China, and sometimes it was aligning with the Soviet Union. And they were pretty clearly beneath the surface. There were pro-Soviet factions in the communist, the Korean Workers' Party. There were pro-Chinese factions. So by saying, well, we have Juche ideology, that was a way to say we're not Maoists, we're not Soviet-aligned revisionists. We have our own ideology. And when the Soviet Union fell, there's a great pamphlet that was written by Kim Jong-il called "Abuses of Socialism Must Not Be Tolerated," where he talked about the bureaucratism and the lack of ideology. And he critiqued the Soviet Union for the way that they practice socialism. It's a very, very well thought out ideological scientific critique of the Soviet system and why it failed. And they had to make clear that they were not, just copying what the Soviet Union was doing. They were not just copying what the Soviet Union was doing. From the beginning, Korean socialism, the socialism of the Korean Workers' Party was uniquely Korean. It had elements of Korean culture and Korean thought in it. And it's different. Another great book, if you want to learn about North Korea, Anna Louise Strong, one of my favorite writers, Anna Louise Strong. She visited North Korea right after the Democratic People's Republic of Korea was declared, before the Korean War. And you can read online this book she wrote, In North Korea, 1949, In North Korea, First Eyewitness Report. I'm posting it in the chat right now. And she talks about how, the Korean Workers' Party was actually a merger. It was not the Communist Party. The Communist Party was one party. And there was also the Social Democratic Party. And there was also the Christian Party. And it was a merger of three different parties, three different anti-Japanese, anti-fascist parties that had supported the United States and the Soviet Union in their fight against Japan and against the Nazis. And it was a united front, and they emerged into one party, the Korean Workers' Party. And Kim Il-sung was not a member of the Communist Party. He was a member of none of the parties. He was the leader of the national liberation struggle. This is all so important. Nobody wants to talk about how North Korea loved the Black Panthers. Nobody ever wants to talk about that. The North Korea really supported the Black Panthers. The Black Panthers, they were supported by Libya, they were supported by China, they were supported by the Soviet Union. But there was a special relationship between the Korean Workers' Party and the Black Panther Party. They had a very special relationship. Eldridge Cleaver went to North Korea, and he actually published an edition of Kim Il-sung's writings that had an introduction written by Eldridge Cleaver that you can read. Eldridge Cleaver, the Black Panther who took an ultra-left adventurous line, he lived in North Korea. One of his daughters was born in North Korea. I mean, and there's just so many lies. They try to tell you that North Korea, they're Korean nationalists. They think Koreans are the supremacist race. Do you know how many Africans live in North Korea? They've taken in, when there's been revolutionary movements and struggles on the African continent, there are many, many African people who have fled to North Korea when they've lost. They've been part of revolutionary movements. They lost. And they have fled to North Korea, right? There are Palestinians. Did you know this? There are Palestinians living in North Korea. There are people from different parts of the world that have moved to North Korea that are part of revolutionary movements from across the planet. In North Korea, they study Malcolm X. They study Ho Chi Minh. They study Marx and Lenin. They study revolutionary movements from all across the world. They very much are proud of being part of this global revolutionary movement against U.S. imperialism. And their solidarity, the solidarity that North Korea has carried out. I mean, they provided pilots for the Libyan Air Force. They provided the bodyguards for Robert Mugabe, the leader of Zimbabwe, the revolutionary government. They sent military support to the Iraqi government and Saddam Hussein and the Ba'athist government there. They sent support to Syria. They have a relationship with Cuba, a very close relationship with Cuba. And you can read what Fidel Castro wrote about Kim Il-sung. And, North Korea, yes, it is a country that is up against so much attack and so much isolation, and they've been subject to so much bombardment. It's not a free and open society, and no one here pretends that it is. It is a country that has been barricaded and attacked and isolated and has had to militarize and lock down and fight for survival. So no one's trying to tell you it's a paradise. No one's trying to tell you that it's a country that everything's perfect, that it's a country with open freedom and all that. It's not. It is a country that's fighting for its life, and is on the right side of history because it wants an independent country. And it took a country that was widely illiterate and widely non-industrialized, and it wiped out illiteracy. It created universal housing. It industrialized. They make their own cell phones in North Korea. They make a lot of products because of the sanctions from the United States and the UN sanctions on them. They can't import very much. So they make a lot of products. Those mountains in North Korea, those mountains are full of minerals that used to be completely worthless. But just because of the computer revolution, those minerals are very valuable. In Africa, in Central Africa, in the mountains, there are wars over these rare elements. Well, they've got those rare elements in the North Korean mountains. And most people in North Korea can speak more than one language. How many Americans can speak more than one language? I can't. But in North Korea, almost all the citizens can speak more than one language. North Korea, the region, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, they are ready. They are ready to come into the future. They are ready to come into the future. And Donald Trump realized this, probably for his own selfish reasons. Who cares? Donald Trump realized that North Korea is an economic boom waiting to happen, right? It is time to, get those minerals from the mountains to be part of, cell phone manufacturing and computers. It is time that tourists from around the world can start pouring into Pyongyang and setting up and going to resorts along the mountains there. It is time that those North Koreans that can speak multiple languages are like part of the global economy. It is a boom waiting to happen. North Korea wants to have a Deng Xiaoping moment. They want to have a reform and opening up. They need market reforms. Their economy needs an update. But the neocons, the neoconservatives, the people who pushed the Iraq war, they ain't going to let it happen. John Bolton sabotaged the talks with North Korea. He sabotaged them. He very much sabotaged the talks with North Korea. In addition to that, we saw the CIA attack the embassy and prevent it. And, do you remember when Dennis Rodman was crying? How Dennis Rodman was just so happy to see Trump and Kim and then when Donald Trump went to North Korea, it was like a surprise, like out of nowhere. All of a sudden, it's like, what? Donald Trump is in North Korea. Donald Trump became the first American sitting president to go to North Korea. That was epic. That was epic. And Tulsi Gabbard and Jim Rogers and so many people are like, it's finally going to happen. We are going to bring peaceful reunification to the Korean Peninsula. However, it was ruined. The CIA and the neoconservatives, the Bush people, ruined it. And that was a disaster. That was a disaster. It was a disaster. And we got to change that. We need to start loudly demanding that what Trump started continue. That needs to be something that the Center for Political Innovation and all of us loudly demand. I don't care, maybe you don't think North Korea is socialist. Maybe you say, well, I don't agree, blah, blah, blah. Doesn't matter. If you believe in peace, if you want a better life on this planet Earth, you should be demanding that the talks with North Korea continue, right? Tulsi Gabbard is not a communist. Donald Trump was not a communist, right? Jim Rogers, the legendary investor who lives in Singapore, not a communist, but he understood that peace on the Korean Peninsula, moving ahead with North Korea was a good moment. Dennis Rodman, not a communist, but he's for it, right? The Harlem Globetrotters, not communists, right? Is that what they're called? The Harlem, I don't remember. It's the basketball team that does like performances in Harlem. What are they called? The Harlem something or other. I don't know. But this moment, I think, is decisive. I really do. And I think now is the time to start talking about peace on the Korean Peninsula. So, folks, I really, really want to emphasize how important this is because I see this as a moment. Where we as a community, we could actually have an impact. Raising the issue of North Korea, popularizing the idea of restarting the negotiations, getting it into the minds of Trump supporters, into the minds of liberals, in the minds of everyone, that restarting the negotiations with North Korea would be a good thing. That's something we could do because it's clear there is a section of the ruling class that wants that for their own selfish reasons. They want that. But if we can intervene as conscious communists, as socialists, as anti-imperialists, if we can intervene and say, we want this also, we want this, right? If we can intervene and say that we want this, right? If we can intervene, that would be epic. And this is a moment where we could have an impact, just like I felt like we were having an impact in 2012. Our small demonstration was like the shot heard around the world. It was shown on North Korean state TV. All kinds of media was covering it. Oh my God, there's people in the capital of capitalism, New York City, who support North Korea. They've got North Korean flags. How is this possible? We could actually have an impact by becoming advocates of peace on the Korean Peninsula, right? This is something that we could do. And by doing that, we could spread consciousness. There might be people who would work with us on this that wouldn't work with us around other issues. But then by working with us, they could learn they could learn about socialism. They could learn about our ideology, or they could learn about the history of the Korean Peninsula and about what U.S. imperialism is all about. This is an opening for us to do something that could really have an impact. Nobody else is going to do it. No other communist group is going to do that. I'll tell you that much. The Communist Party USA has cut ties with North Korea. They cut off their relationship with North Korea. During the time where there was a real danger of war breaking out on the Korean Peninsula, the Revolutionary Communist Party, the Maoists, they published a whole issue of their paper, Why North Korea is Not a Socialist Country. Thank you so much. So helpful. Just so you know, we don't support them or anything, right? Nobody else is going to do it. Nobody else is going to do it. But this is an opening for us. This is an opening for us to intervene. And I am excited about the possibility that we could become the voice demanding that what Trump started be finished. And we start negotiating peace on the Korean Peninsula. So I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. I've given you opening remarks, but I figured, right now I know there's a lot of people that have questions and there's things they want me to answer in the second half of the show, right? So if you have more questions, keep the super chats rolling in. I've only got 3 so far, but I'm going to read you all a little bit for the next little bit. We'll see about more super chats coming in. We're going to read a little bit from the official biography of Kim Il-sung. We're going to read from it. I'll be writing down super chats as they come in. And then after I finish reading from it, we'll read for a little bit, not sure how long. And then we'll do the roll call, and then I'll start answering questions. So keep the super chats rolling in. I am going to read to you from the official biography of Kim Il-sung. So here we go. All right. Kim Il-sung, the great leader of the Korean people, was the author of the Juche idea and the Songun idea, pioneer of the revolutionary cause of Juche, the founder of Socialist Korea, and the eternal president of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Devoting his life to the cause of the independence of the masses for 70 years since he embarked on the road of the Korean Revolution in his early teens, he piled up outstanding, imperishable exploits. He led the anti-imperialist. He pioneered the revolutionary cause of Juche by force of arms. He defeated Japanese imperialism in his 30s to liberate Korea and the self-styled mightiest U.S. imperialism in his 40s to defend the security of his country and the sovereignty of his nation. He led the anti-imperialist, anti-feudal democratic revolution, socialist revolution, and socialist construction to victory, thus enabling a socialist system in which the masses of people have become the masters of everything, and everything serves them, a powerful socialist country, independent, self-supporting, and self-reliance in national defense. By frustrating at every step the imperialists and other hostile forces, schemes to isolate and stifle the DPRK, he staunchly defended the Korean style of socialism centered on the masses and demonstrated its might across the world. He brought the problem of succession to the revolutionary cause of Juche to a brilliant solution and rendered outstanding contributions to the expediting the independent reunification of the country and the cause of independent peoples all over the world. Regarding the people are my God as his motto during the whole period of his revolutionary career, he always shared good times and bad with his people. and did everything for their benefit and devoted his all to the prosperity of his country and the well-being of his people till the last moment of his life. For the imperishable achievements he made for his country and his fellow people, and for the times in history, Kim Il-sung will always live in the hearts of mankind as the son of Juche. The editorial board, greeting the centenary of his birth in 2012, publishes this English version of the history of revolutionary activities of President Kim Il-sung, published in Korean on April 2011. Right? Is the second election. All right. Very good question. Very good question. Keep the super chats rolling in. I'm going to continue reading from Kim Il-sung's biography, the official biography released on the centenary of his birth. Kim Il-sung, the founder of Socialist Korea, was born at Mangyongdae, Pyongyang, on April 15th, 1912. He was born on tax day. In America, that's tax day, April 15th. His family was patriotic and revolutionary, which made it a family tradition to imbue its children with a spirit of loving the country, the nation, and the people from generation to generation. All the members of the family, his grandfather, his great-grandfather, his grandmother, his father, his mother, uncle, younger brother, and his maternal grandfather and uncle, fought bravely in the van of struggle against foreign aggressors for the independence of the country and freedom and well-being of its people. They were all ardent patriots and revolutionaries. His great-grandfather, Kim Il-sung, was a patriot who led the struggle to sink the U.S. aggressor ship General Sherman and to repel the U.S. warship Shenandoah, which sailed into the Taedong River, the gateway of Pyongyang, in the latter half of the 19th century. Can you believe this? His grandparents were attacking U.S. ships that sailed into Korea. Amazing. They repelled U.S. warships on the Korean Peninsula. His grandfather, Kim Poo-hyun, and grandmother, Ri Po-ik, were also patriots who put their children on the road of revolution and gave active assistance to their revolutionary struggle, themselves fighting against the Japanese imperialists. His father, Kim Hyong-jik, was a leader of the anti-Japanese national liberation movement of Korea, who devoted his whole life to the struggle of the independence of the country and the freedom and liberation of its people. Having embarked on the road of revolution in his early days with the idea of Jiwon as his life motto, Kim Hyok-jik, on March 23, 1917, formed the Korean National Association, an anti-Japanese underground revolutionary organization, which was most steadfast in the anti-imperialist and independent stand and the largest of its kind in and outside of the Korean, outside of the country at the time, and had a solid mass foundation. In line with the requirements of the new situation, which emerged after the March 1st popular uprising in 1919, he played the role of pioneer in changing the course of the anti-Japanese national liberation movement of the Korean people from the nationalist to a proletarian one. He put forward a policy of armed struggle and exerted devoted efforts to the very last moment of his life to unite armed units and achieve the unity and cohesion of the anti-Japanese patriotic forces. Kim Il-sung's mother, Kang Pan-suk, was a leader of the Korean women's movement who dedicated her life to the struggle for the victory of the Korean Revolution and the social emancipation of women. She organized an anti-Japanese women's association, the first revolutionary women's mass organization in Korea, and waged a relentless struggle for the country's liberation and women's social emancipation. Despite dire poverty and ceaseless persecution by the Japanese police, she assisted with all her might the devotion and revolutionary activities of her husband, Kim Yong-jik, and her son, Kim Il-sung. Kim Il-sung's uncle, Kim Hyung-gwon, and his brother, Kim Chol-ju, were also resolute revolutionary fighters who joined the anti-Japanese revolutionary struggle early in life. Kim Il-sung's maternal grandfather, Kang Ton-uk, and uncle Kang Jin-sok were anti-Japanese patriotic fighters too. Kim Il-sung's family was a popular one whose members were diligent and frugal and set great store by humanitarianism. Engaged in tenant farming for generations, this family was very poor, but they earned a living by honest and diligent work and valued character and humanitarianism, regarding it as their family philosophy that a man can live without money, but not without humanitarianism. The family was warm-hearted and always ready to help one another and its neighbors. Kim Il-sung's home was the soil where his revolutionary ideas and traits as a great man sprouted, the cradle of the revolution where the Juche bloodline struck root. When he was born as the eldest son of his family, his father, Kim Hyung-jik, named him Song-ju. Song means to become, and Ju means pillar, aspiring for him to become a pillar of the country. Under the revolutionary influence of his parents, through hard study and experience of contemporary social phenomena full of contradictions, and through revolutionary struggle against the Japanese imperialists, Kim Il-sung grew up to be a great revolutionary. He said, "I was educated in patriotism by my parents and was under their revolutionary influence from my earliest years. In the course of seeking for truth, with such an education and influence, and of witnessing social phenomena full of injustice and conflict, I came to sympathize with humiliated people and to hate the imperialists, the landowners, and the capitalist class who oppressed and exploited the people, and determined to devote my life to the struggle to liberate the people." That actually reminds me of James Connolly. You know, James Connolly, the leader of the Irish people in their national liberation struggle. He said that, what has he said? An English boss is a monster, but an Irish one is worse. Meaning that not only did he hate, the colonial oppression of the Irish people, he also hated the class stratification and the exploitation of man by man. And that's similar to what Kim Il-sung says here. He said not only did he hate the imperialists, but also the landowners and the capitalists. His parents told him about their country with its beautiful mountains and limpid rivers, about the resourceful and brave Korean nation with its 5,000-year-long history, and the people and patriotic generals who bravely fought against the feudal rulers and foreign aggressors, about the brilliant traditional culture which had enriched the treasure house of world culture, about the brutal colonial rule of the Japanese imperialists in Korea and their national discrimination, and about the ruthless exploitation by the landlords and capitalists. This nurtured in young Kim Il-sung the spirit of loving his country and his nation and hating the enemy. His father's injunction that Koreans should always cherish the soul of Korea and liberate their country and build a new society for themselves by their own efforts imbued Kim Il-sung with a thoroughgoing consciousness of national independence. His father's stories about Lenin and the October Socialist Revolution and the Soviet Union, where socialist ideals had been realized, gave him a yearning for a new society where the people would be the masters. He witnessed the dignified attitude of his father, who awed the Japanese imperialists, even when he was being arrested for the incident of the Korean National Association. He saw the fortitude of his mother, who fearlessly resisted the Japanese policemen who brutally raided and searched the house after his father's arrest. He was also impressed by the unyielding fighting spirit of his father in Pyongyang prison, who did not abandon his principles despite all his suffering in prison. His father never stopped fighting for a moment, even when he was ill in bed, saying that one must never give up the lofty aim one set at the beginning and must liberate the country without fail, even if one's flesh was torn to shreds and ground to pieces. His boundless loyalty to the revolution, revolutionary faith, and strong willpower exerted a great influence over his young son. Can you believe this? Kim Il-sung's father got arrested for forming the Korean National Association. And then after his father was arrested, Japanese policemen raided young Kim Il-sung's house. His father was in prison and never abandoned his beliefs and was sick in bed as a result of being in prison. This is what helped Kim Il-sung develop the strength that he had later in his life. Kim Il-sung experienced a bitter life and witnessed the sufferings and miseries of his country under the rule of the Japanese colonialists. In the course of this, he fostered anti-Japanese patriotic ideas and class consciousness, and cherished the loyalty and lofty aim of taking the road of revolution. The 1910s were the darkest period of Korea's national tragedy, during which its people were reduced to being colonial slaves, deprived of their country by the Japanese imperialists. Korea was turned into a sanguinary prison, into a hell of death, a hell of death. Kim Il-sung's family, like others, worked on the farm, but their lives were poverty-stricken and miserable. This enabled Kim Il-sung to keenly perceive the reactionary nature of the Japanese imperialist colonial rule and the contradictions inherent in a society subjected to exploitation. The March 1st popular uprising in 1919 was an important turning point in Kim Il-sung's development. He walked scores of kilometers alongside the resistance marchers from Mangyongdae to Pathgong Gate. The people's brave, unyielding struggle against the Japanese aggressors and the heinous brutalities of the Japanese policemen, killing recklessly the bare-handed masses with bayonets, made him cherish the spirit of resistance against the Japanese imperialists, and the fighting spirit and heroic mettle of his nation sank deep into his mind. Oh, Isabel dos Santos. I'll write that down. And if anyone else has any more super chats, by all means, shoot them my way. You know, as I'm reading this, I'm actually thinking about, you know, like how much grit Kim Il-sung had. His father's being dragged away to jail. His home's being searched by the Japanese imperialists, and people get mad at me, you know, because I ask them to like drive somewhere or something. You know, it's like, you know, all of us who want to be revolutionaries, you know, could really, I mean, learn from this. I mean, the amount of sacrifices that were made, and you know, I mean, I think about this and people complaining that, you know, that, oh my God, you know, he asked me to drive somewhere, or he asked me to, you know, it's like, you know, being a revolutionary is not a dinner party. It's not funny business. It's not, you know, playing a video game or painting a picture. It's work. And the amount of sacrifices that he made, you know, he was in a crowd of people. I just read to you about how he was in a crowd of people who were being killed with bayonets. The Japanese police were bayoneting a crowd of unarmed protesters. 1919, it was called the White Robe Movement in Korea. The Korean people were protesting Japanese occupation. They wore long white robes. They were led by Christian ministers. They were peacefully protesting, you know, protesting for independence of their country. And the Japanese police were bayoneting them. Imagine young Kim Il-sung is in a crowd of people, right? And he's marching at this protest, and this Japanese police are pulling out bayonets and stabbing people. I'll write it down. All right. And they're stabbing people. And thank you for the super chat. And as more super chats come in, and young Kim Il-sung, 1919, he's in this crowd of the white robe protesters in 1919, and they're stabbing them with bayonets. And he's in this crowd, right? After his father has been dragged away in the middle of the night, after Japanese policemen ransacked his house, his father comes home from jail, sick in bed, dying. Like this is somebody who's really sacrificed, right? As he moved to Junggang in northern Korea, and then to Linjiang and Bangdu and Fosong in Manchuria with his parents. So he's in China. That's Manchuria's China, right? Who were engaged in revolutionary activities. He felt bitterly the sorrow and pain of the ruined Korean people. Can you imagine that? He's imbued his whole life, his Korean patriotism. He's all about being Korean. But after his father is dragged to jail and gets sick, after the police raid his home, after he attends a peaceful protest and the Japanese police are stabbing people with bayonets and murdering unarmed protesters, he and his family, they have to move to China. They have to go over the border to Manchuria to get away from it. And you know, for some people, moving from one country to another is another thing, but his whole life is Korean patriotism. His whole life is being proud to be Korean, loving his homeland, and he has to leave. His family, they have to leave. On March 16th, 1923, in compliance with his father's intention, he left Bangdu and reached Mangyongdae on March 29th after a 14-day journey on foot for 400 kilometers. 14 days walking someplace, right? People get mad at me because I asked them to drive an hour, right? And you know, Kim Il-sung walked for 14 days straight, a 14-day journey on foot. On this trek, he got acquainted with the fact that the Korean people are really kind-hearted and have a high moral sense. That means he's not just walking. As he's walking for 14 days, a 14-day walk, he's stopping and talking to people. He's getting to know the people as he's walking, right? It might be kind of like Che Guevara's motorcycle diaries. You know, Che Guevara took that motorcycle trip that kind of changed him politically. So we have, you know, young Kim Il-sung is walking for 14 days, and the whole way he's meeting the Korean people, the peasantry, the workers. In his homeland, he attended Changdok School in Chilgol, and while studying the history, geography, and culture of Korea, he gained the valuable insight that the Korean people are simple, diligent, and yet brave and stout-hearted, unyielding in the face of difficulties and ordeals of any description, polite, tender-hearted, and resolute and uncompromising with regards to injustice. Damn. That makes me like the Korean people. He just described the Korean people. He said they are simple, diligent, but brave and stout-hearted, unyielding in the face of difficulties and ordeals of any description, polite, tender-hearted, and resolute and uncompromising with regard to injustice. That's a great way to be, isn't it? Resolute and uncompromising with regard to injustice, tender-hearted and polite, unyielding in the face of difficulties, brave and stout-hearted. That's great. While witnessing the bloody resistance offered by workers, peasants, and youth and other broad sections of the masses against the Japanese imperialists, he learned about his people's national dignity and will to achieve their country's independence, which could not be broken by any means. And he affirmed that the country could be liberated by Koreans themselves if they were properly organized and enlisted. This is the revolutionary activities of Kim Il-sung. And if folks have super chats for me to answer in the second half of the show, by all means, keep those rolling in. We're going to keep reading this for a little bit. Witnessing the atrocities committed by the Japanese aggressors under the signboard of civil government, he clearly realized that the Japanese imperialists were the most heinous stranglers of freedom and dignity of the Korean nation, and vicious exploiters and plunderers who subjected the Korean people to poverty and hunger, and was convinced that the Korean nation could drive out the Japanese imperialists only by means of struggle and lead a happy life in an independent country. Informed that his father had been arrested by the Japanese police, he left Mangyongdae on January 22nd, 1925, and trekked 400 kilometers. He crossed the Amnok River on February 3rd, This was a historic turning point, marking his embarkation on the road of revolution. He recalled later, I crossed the Amnok River when I was 13. He's just 13 years old. Did you hear this? He's walking 14-day journeys on foot. He's just 13 years old. He's 13 years old. All this time we've been reading all of this, he's only 13 years old, folks. Like that. And it's like, don't you love how they just like throw that in here? Like he's doing all these activities. He's marching all this area. He's watching the police raid his home and drag his dad to jail. He's marching in a protest where they're stabbing the people with spears. He's doing all this. And then like they just passingly mention, oh, and he's only 13 years old. And it's like, he's 13? Christ. I crossed the Amnok River when I was 13, firmly determined not to return before Korea became independent. I was young and I could not repress my sorrow as I sang the song of the Amnok River, written by someone, and wondered when I would be able to tread this land again, when I would return to this land where I had grown up and where our forefathers, where our forefathers' graves, and where there were our forefathers' graves. He acquired the qualities and traits of a revolutionary through hard study and revolutionary practice. Why didn't he just watch BreadTube videos? You know, why didn't he just turn on Vosh? Hard study. What is that? Like, did he read like Marxist books or something? Did he actually learn this ideology? He didn't just like go off anti-communist stereotypes. I'm joking, of course, but there you go. He read many books in his early years while studying hard in school subjects. He read the biography of Lenin, the fundamentals of socialism, the revolutionary history of Russia and Lenin, the great men of Korea, and biographies of Korean heroes, and other biographies of famous patriotic generals of Korea and famous men of other parts of the world, as well as revolutionary novels. In the process, he developed a discerning eye and an independent view on social phenomena and revolutionary struggles. Particularly in compliance with his father's intention, he mastered the Chinese language at an early age. Wow. So he already spoke Korean, and then he learned to speak Chinese at an early age. He learned he's bilingual at an early age. He carried out difficult revolutionary assignments given to him by his father, at the same time as disseminating anti-Japanese patriotic ideas among the students and the broad sections of the masses and educating them. This practical struggle enabled him to foster his firm revolutionary will. His firm revolutionary will. You got to have a will that is ironclad. You got to say, I am going to do this. I have a task to do, and I am going to do it. Having a revolutionary ironclad will. That's such an important thing, right? Grit and will and a willingness to do what you say you're going to do and not chicken out and not back down, to make commitments and keep them. That's what I like about Kim Il-sung. On June 5th, 1926, his father died. Wow. So he's 14, right? That's a year after he's 13. His father died when he's 14 years old. To Kim Il-sung, Kim Hyong-jik was not merely a father, but at the same time a teacher and a leader who led him along the path of revolution. And the relation between them was one between revolutionary comrades, transcending blood ties. This bereavement left him with great pain, incomparable to anything. Wow. So not only what has he been through up to this point, right? He has seen his father dragged out of his home and arrested. He's seen the police violently raid his home. He has been in a protest where the Japanese police are stabbing people with bayonets and killing them. He's had to flee and move to China. He's learned to speak Chinese. And then, he's walking 400 miles and he's 14 years old. He's 14 years old and his father died. However, he drew strength from the extraordinary heritage his father had left him. The idea of aim high, preparedness for 3 contingencies: death from hunger, from a beating, and from the cold. That's interesting. What does that mean? Aim high, preparedness for 3 contingencies: death from hunger, death from a beating, and death from the cold. And the idea of gaining comrades and 2 pistols. He firmly resolved to devote his all to the sacred struggle for the country's liberation, to his father's instructions. I have no idea what that means. I think that is actually missing something in translation there, right? Maybe there's somebody who speaks Korean who can explain to me what this meant. But I'm going to read it again one more time. And I'm just, as a white guy, as someone who doesn't speak Korean, I'm not familiar with this. I don't know what this means. He drew strength from the extraordinary heritage his father had left him. The idea of aim high, preparedness for 3 contingencies, and then in parentheses, death from hunger, death from a beating, and from the cold, comma, the idea of gaining comrades and 2 pistols. And he firmly resolved to devote his all to sacred struggle for the country's liberation, true to his father's instructions. What does gaining comrades and 2 pistols mean? What does preparedness for 3 contingencies, death from hunger, from a beating, and from the cold? What does that mean? Does that mean like his father taught him how to not die from hunger, how to like ration his food, how to, not die from a beating or being cold? What does that mean? I don't know what that means. There's something in translation I'm not getting there. So maybe there's somebody who speaks Korean who can explain that part to me. I don't quite know what that means. But there you go. In mid-June 1926, this is like the same year that his father died, Kim Il-sung moved from Fusong to Hwadwan to attend the Hwasong Yusok School in compliance with his mother's desire for him to continue his studies, whatever the cost, to be faithful to her husband's last request that their son be sent to a secondary school on the recommendation of his father's friend who had made efforts to realize his own hope to go to high school. Koreans can defeat the Japanese imperialists only through military confrontation, and I can stand in the front rank of the independence movement only when I have military knowledge. Such was the view of Kim Il-sung, cherished when he was entering Hwasong Usuk School, a military and political school. Kim Il-sung analyzed and judged the education provided by the school from a unique point of view and a critical approach. The school gave education in nationalist ideas and outmoded military training reminiscent of old Korea. And what disappointed Kim Il-sung most was the ideological backwardness of the school. The school authorities clung to nationalist ideas, rejecting advanced ones for no good reason. The limitations of the school revealed the limitations of the nationalist movement itself. Kim Il-sung could see the whole picture of the nationalist movement through the school, and the expectations he entertained gradually crumbled. Realizing that the country's independence could not be achieved by outdated methods of nationalist campaigners, he made energetic efforts to find a new way for the liberation of the country. So he's a free thinker, right? He's going to this big military school to learn about, the national liberation movement, and they're teaching nationalism and outdated military methods. And he's like, no, this is bullshit. I'm going to learn communism. He avidly read the Communist Manifesto and other books on Marxism, Leninism, and he studied revolutionary principles expounded in these classics in connection with the actual situation in Korea. That is so important. Whenever you're reading the Communist Manifesto, whenever you're reading the works of Marx and Lenin, you should be applying it to actual living struggles. The whole time he's reading the Communist Manifesto, he's thinking, how can I apply this to the struggle of the Korean people? The whole time he's reading What Is to Be Done. He's reading, the Poverty of Philosophy. He's thinking, how can I apply it? It's not just this vague intellectual game. He's not playing a computer game. He's thinking, how can I apply this to the struggle to free my country? In the course of this, he was convinced that the way for the Korean Revolution lay in overthrowing Japanese imperialism, liberating the country, and building a new society where the masses of working people, including the peasants, would be well off. Further, he considered it necessary to train faithful revolutionaries of a new generation, unaffected by sycophancy and factionalism, in order to pave a new way for the Korean Revolution, and started this work among the students of the school. He explained to them the socialist idea in connection with the practical issues of the Korean Revolution, and brought them to a correct view and attitude towards the Korean Revolution. As a result, the tendency of yearning for a new trend of thought increased day by day among the students, and the majority of them adopted this advanced idea. So, wow, he's at this school, they're teaching nationalist and traditional ideas. He's saying it's wrong, and he actually wins the other students at the school to his communist ideas. Kim Il-sung personally met students who were sensitive to the new trend of thought and yearned for the socialist idea, one by one, to exert a revolutionary influence on them. He rallied many revolutionary comrades with whom he would share ideas in life. In the course of this, a way of independent development for the Korean Revolution was explored, and a hard core of a revolutionary vanguard organization was prepared. Later, in September 1926, he called for a meeting of the core elements by the Hwafei River. He clarified the necessity of forming an organization that would undertake the Korean Revolution and emphasized forward preparations for formation. On October 10th, he convened a preparatory meeting. At the meeting, he submitted for discussion the name, character, and fighting program and rules of conduct. Rules of conduct for this new organization. On the basis of this, he formed the Down with Imperialism Union, the DIU, on October 17th, 1926. The Down with Imperialism Union. That's pretty badass. I like that. I want to join the Down with Imperialism Union. Does anyone else want to join the Down with Imperialism Union? That's a badass name. In the inaugural meeting, he delivered a speech titled, "Let Us Overthrow Imperialism." In this speech, he said that it assumed, in name and in fact, the mission of overthrowing imperialism. The organization must set as its own immediate task the destruction of Japanese imperialism, the sworn enemy of the Korean people, and the achievement of building socialism and communism in Korea, and further, destroying all imperialists and building communism throughout the world. He stressed that in order to carry out this fighting program, it was imperative to unite with members of the Union ideologically and volitionally, and at the same time reinforce the organization with reliable young people who were determined to devote themselves wholeheartedly to the struggle against Japanese imperialism. He said that the members should observe the rules of organizational life. The printed rules of the Down with Imperialism Union were distributed among the attendants. According to the unanimous opinion and desire of all the members, Kim Il-sung was elected to the head of the Down with Imperialism Union. The Down with Imperialism Union was a genuine communist revolutionary organization of a new type and the first of its kind in Korea. Thanks to the formation of the Down with Imperialism Union, the Korean Revolution was able to advance along the road of independent development based on clear-cut fighting objective and correct strategy. Moreover, it enabled the Korean people to carve out their destiny and their responsibility as the motive force of history. The formation of the Down with Imperialism Union served as the starting point of the struggle to found a new party in Korea and a declaration of a life and death struggle to overthrow Japanese imperialism by force of arms. This was the root of the Korean Workers' Party. Wow. So there you go. Those are the first 8 pages of the history of the revolutionary activities of President Kim Il-sung. And, you know, it's funny because my whole life I've had people complain about me and say, Caleb, you're just so obsessed with communism. Do you ever think of anything but communism? You're just so obsessed with revolution. Well, apparently so was Mr. Kim Il-sung, right? And that, that there's people that are really devoted to this and really focused on getting it done. And that's a good thing. Right? I mean, Kim Il-sung, it looks like you look at the sacrifices that he made. If you look at what he went through, I mean, he's just a teenager here and he's starting the Down with Imperialism Union at his college. You know, there was a group in America that was very big around the time of the Spanish-American War. It was called the Anti-Imperialist League, right? So in America, we had the Anti-Imperialist League, and it looks like that in Korea, they had the Down with Imperialism Union. So there you go. That's pretty wild. But maybe we'll pick that up later some other time. But I just wanted to read that. But if anyone has any more super chats, for questions for the second half of the show, that would be great. There's one more thing I wanted to comment on in my opening remarks before we start doing super chats, before we have the roll call. So I'm going to get to that. I just got to take a drink of water. I know it's gross that I drink on here, but my throat is going to kill me if I don't take a drink. So, Julian Assange, I don't know if y'all saw, but the New York Times, the Guardian, Der Spiegel, and others, they have put out this statement saying they want the charges against Julian Assange dropped. Well, that's a good thing. I mean, it's good they put this statement out, but it's like, really? Like, what's taking you so long? Like, where were you when he was being dragged out of the embassy? Where were you when, he was rotting in Belmarsh prison? What took you so long? That's the first question. And the second question is, those publications, they may now say they're against using the Espionage Act against Julian Assange. They may say that, but they set the stage for everything that's happened to Julian Assange. Before they dragged Julian Assange out of the embassy and right afterwards, they did all of this work to make people hate Julian Assange. Julian Assange revealed war crimes. Julian Assange, was playing this heroic role as the head of WikiLeaks. He put his life on the line. He's been tortured and I mean, he's just being treated horrendously. And he's making all these sacrifices, and they were running articles in the New York Times and in the Guardian, and mainstream media news outlets were doing stories about how he didn't take the garbage out in his room at the embassy enough. Seriously. I mean, this guy is he's risked his life by exposing all the dirty secrets of the imperialists. And we're supposed to go, oh, what a slob, he didn't take the garbage out enough. Seriously. Right? And then this is my favorite. I believe it was it the New York Times, the Guardian, or one of these publications. They said, and I kid you not, they wrote that that Julian Assange is a narcissist with an overblown sense of self-importance. I looked at that and I'm like, okay, he's only the founder of WikiLeaks. He's only at the center of an international scandal. He's only walled up in the Ecuadorian embassy running from governments. He's only revealed the deepest, darkest secrets of the US imperialists. And it's he's a narcissist. He's got an overblown sense of importance. How do you get more important than Julian Assange? And it's he's got an and it's I saw that and I was just that is so ridiculous, right? There is so much jealousy inside of everyone these days, right? Everyone's very, very jealous because we've all been pumped with social media and Netflix and all of this, and we all want to be famous. We all want to be famous. And so we all have this jealousy of anyone who's more famous than us. So we're supposed to see, oh, wow, Julian Assange has this overblown sense of self-importance, and we're supposed to turn on him because of that. And it's we do realize that he exposed the lies of the imperialists. And for that, he was walled up in the Ecuadorian embassy. He's now rotting in a jail. They want to take him to the United States and, and try him under the Espionage Act just for doing something completely legal, which is exposing the, information that was given to him by somebody else. He's a publisher. He's not a government employee. He was never a government employee. This is classified information that somebody gave to him, somebody leaked to him. And we're supposed to stop supporting him because he didn't take the garbage out. He didn't take the garbage out. He didn't take the garbage out, and he's a narcissist. He has this overblown sense of self-importance. They are really doing a nasty mind fuck to people nowadays. Everyone has this jealousy, right? I mean, how do you get more important than Julian Assange? Seriously, I mean, Julian Assange is at the center of of imperialism. He's in the internet, in the middle of this international scandal, and they're like, oh my God, he thinks he's so important. I think he's important. The CIA thinks he's important. Mike Pompeo, who wanted to kill him, he thinks he's important. Hillary Clinton, who wanted to drone him, she thinks he's important. I mean, and that's how this stuff works. And this kind of character assassination, this is what they're going for now, right? We'll get to this later. Someone asked about Isabel dos Santos, but it's like they are convinced that if they can get you to hate somebody on a personal level, right? If you can smear someone's personality. All-day telethon for Uhuru Movement starts tomorrow at 7 a.m. Central. Central. Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. I'll announce it in the second half of the show as well. I mean, it's if they can assassinate someone's character, and appeal to that jealous part of everyone that wants to be famous. And it's like they want us all to be jealous of Julian Assange and be like, what a jerk. What a jerk. Julian Assange thinks he's so important. Ugh. And they want to appeal to this like jealous part of all of us and convince us that Julian Assange thinks he's so important, but he's not, and like it is a nasty mindfuck. So what if he doesn't take his garbage out, right? Does he deserve to die for not taking his garbage out? Does he deserve to die for being a narcissist? It's a nasty mindfuck that they've done, where it's like, if they can convince you somebody wouldn't be the best roommate you've ever had, if they can if they can paint a picture of someone that reminds you of somebody you once knew who you didn't like, somehow it makes government repression of them okay. Like, this is the weirdest thing, right? And it's not that Julian Assange is a narcissist. It's that we're all narcissists, right? We're all so self-interested and so alienated. And we all want attention for ourselves so much. And we're all thinking about our own little lane. We're all stuck in our own lane. We're not thinking about the wider implications of things, right? That they can convince us that Julian Assange reminds us of a roommate we had who didn't take out the garbage, or Julian Assange reminds us of like an ex-boyfriend or ex-girlfriend that we had that was very narcissistic. And that makes it okay. That's what the Guardian, the New York Times were all running. They were basically trying to convince you that Julian Assange didn't have a good personality. So it was okay to do what they did. And it's like, we don't even know if they're telling the truth. We know these news outlets lie all the time to support imperialism, but they're appealing to our egos. They want us to be narcissistic. That's what they want, right? Because why would it matter? Why in the world would it matter if unless they can like foster that jealous part of our ego, right? And that's how they operate. They want that jealous part of us, that resentful part, that part of us that is mad at somebody that we haven't spoken to in years. It's holding a grudge against somebody else. They want to appeal to that grudge holding, resentful part of us. That's what they're appealing to, and trying to use that part of our minds to then justify repressing somebody who exposed the lies of the imperialists. That's what they're doing. It's a brilliant psychological operation, but it's evil, because Julian Assange is not your roommate who didn't take out the garbage. Julian Assange is not your ex-boyfriend or your ex-girlfriend. Julian Assange is not, some boastful person that you were jealous of in college. He's not somebody who got better grades than you. He's not somebody who was the flashy athlete that you were jealous of that had all the girls in high school. He's not any of that. He's Julian Assange. He's his own person. And is he important? Yeah, you bet he's important. He's in the middle of this huge international scandal. And you look at the psychological operation they carry out against Julian Assange, where it's like, we're supposed to hate Julian Assange because they've painted a picture of him to remind us of people we don't like. And I was listening to a podcast today, and I was listening to somebody else, and somebody said the same thing. I went someplace and I was listening to somebody, and they said this. And then I listened to a podcast that came up today, and it said this. Did you know that they have actually done studies? And this sounds this sounds like something people say, like a cliche that's not actually true, but this is actually true. They've done studies that if you hold on to bitterness, and you hold on to grudges, and you hold on to resentment, it actually hurts your physical health. Did you know that? It will actually cause physical harm to you. The more bitterness you hold on to, the more resentment you hold on to, it actually hurts your physical health. Whereas the more gratitude you express, the more optimism you express, these things actually lead to your physical health being healthier. Did you know this? This is like amazing, right? I mean, it sounds like something that some self-help person said, well, if you hold on to resentment, that hurts your physical health. Well, it actually does, right? And you look at the death rate, and you look at the suicide rate, and you look at the drug addiction rate, and you look at the situation. Lumpia says it best. I literally don't care about his personal shit in this fight. Who could care about his personal shit unless you have a big dose of that resentment? Right? Unless you have a big dose of that resentment, if you've got a big dose of that narcissistic resentment, that jealousy, that, what do you call it? That resentment, that jealousy, that grudge holding. If you have a bunch of that, then all of a sudden you care. And you resent Julian Assange because he's more popular than you are. and you're mad at him for not taking out the garbage. And this is, it shows that there's a lot of people that are carrying around a lot of bitterness inside of them, and that the media has figured out how to manipulate that for political ends. They basically, figured out that there's a lot of people walking around who've got resentment, got poison emotions. Rupert Fellows puts it best, poison emotions. They got poison emotions inside of them. They've got bitterness and they've got resentment. And they said, how can we get people to be okay with us repressing Julian Assange for doing what is completely justifiable, freedom of the press, exposing war crimes? How can we do that? Well, let's paint a picture of him that will touch a nerve with these people, and it'll tap into everyone's bitterness and everyone's resentment, and it'll work. And this is how the character assassination works, right? We all have been screwed in our lives, and we all feel like we should have things that we don't have. And we have all been mistreated. Some of us have been mistreated more than others. And some of us have been through not as much as others, right? That it's not a contest, right? And there is hardship in all of our lives. And that part of the way that we are all being manipulated is they're trying to get us to dwell on it all, right? To dwell on it all, to fantasize about revenge, to fantasize about anger that we have, to project our bitter feelings, our huge pile of bitter feelings onto situations that have nothing to do with us, like Julian Assange. This is the psychological manipulation the imperialists are doing. And it's very, very, very effective. And we have to be note of this. Not only is it hurting all of our health and probably contributing to the death rate and contributing to the health problems, but on top of that, it is actually being psychologically manipulated. If you live in this negative, vengeful, angry, spiteful place, the imperialists will figure out how to manipulate that vengeful, spiteful place to make you fight with people you should be supporting, like Julian Assange. They will do that, right? The imperialists, they know very well how to take that, maybe the anger that you have is perfectly justified. You got bullied, you got, mistreated by your ex-partner, you got divorced, you got abused when you were a child. Maybe there's all kinds of things that could have happened to you, right? And you could be totally justified in all of your anger. But Satan, the U.S. imperialists, Satan, will figure out how to take that justifiable outrage and bitterness that you have. If you surround yourself in that bitterness, Satan, the U.S. imperialists and Satan will figure out how to take that bitterness that you're carrying around everywhere and turn it around on you, and turn it around on the people that you should be loving, and turning it around on other anti-imperialists and other people in the revolutionary movement. If you carry around that bitterness, Satan will figure out after a while how to turn it around against people you should be loving. Think about it, right? I mean, this is a very common thing, is that, that people take their bitterness out on the people they love the most, right? That's a really common thing, right? People pour their anger out on their spouses. Why would you pour your anger out on your spouse? Your spouse is the one you love the most. But the people you're really angry at are far off, or they're dead, or they're out of your life. So you could just take your anger out on your spouse, or you can take your anger out on your classmates or your good friends or something like that. And that the people around you eventually become an outlet for the bitterness that you carry around. The only way you can really, really hold on to lasting relationships is it's not a matter of just making sure that you never get manipulated. It's a matter of you have to actively give up the bitterness. You have to actually say, Satan, I don't want this bitterness inside of me. You have to do things to make the bitterness go away. And that can be a very hard thing to do, right? It can be a very hard thing to do. I told you I do the classical music thing every morning and every night before I go to sleep. I exercise. I try to keep myself occupied. I chant political mantras to myself. I chant mantras to myself. A new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression, but the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression, and the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, but revolution is the main trend in the world today. You remember these mantras, right? And you chant them out, right? And the idea is that it's a way to get that bitterness. It's a way to shut down that bitterness, right? There's that expression you've probably all heard, the idle brain is a devil's playground, but it's true, right? When your brain just sits, when you're not doing anything, your brain just sits, that's when that bitterness comes up. That's when the things, your own inadequacies come up. That's when the people who've harmed you come up. That's when all that bitterness comes up, right? That's when it all comes up. And that it is an active job. It is like an active full-time job on some people's part to combat Satan, right? To combat that evil. Because if you just sit there in silence, if you just sit there, the bitterness is going to come. Furthermore, right? If you turn on Netflix is going to reinforce it, right? Turn on Netflix, watch 13 Reasons Why. That'll make you feel better, right? Or take out Twitter. Nothing makes people feel better than Twitter, right? Nothing makes people feel better than Twitter. You got to fill up the empty space in your life with positive things. That's what you got to do. You got to fill up the empty space in your life with positive things, and you got to find positive things, revolutionary slogans, mantras, revolutionary music. You got to find positive things and fill up the empty space. You got to do that, because if not, bad things are going to seep in, right? In China during the Cultural Revolution, they used to have big speakers, and they would play revolutionary songs all day, and they'd have people on the speakers reading the writings of Mao Zedong out loud, reading from the Red Book, and it'd be big speakers blasting the Red Book, blasting revolutionary music. People saw that and they said, "Oh my God, it's so totalitarian." Well, but it was about, drowning out the bitterness, drowning out the resentment, filling the air with revolutionary politics and an optimism. You listen to a lot of that music, a lot of the Chinese communist music, I will tell you, is very optimistic. It's very beautifully optimistic, right? You listen to, without the Communist Party, there would be no new China. That's a great song. In fact, you know what? We can play some of that now, right? I am going to play, this is the music that I really like, right? We're going to put some of this on, right? Because, they would, in China, they would fill the air, with this kind of revolutionary music. So I'm going to put on like 2 different songs that I like from the Chinese Revolution. I've never done that before. We've never done music on these streams. Well, I guess we did the Beethoven thing the other day. So this is like a continuation of that. This is a different version of that. But I'm going to put on some Chinese communist music, right? And it has like a very optimistic vibe, right? It's a very optimistic vibe, right? And, we'll put on some of that, and it's like it's a struggle, right? To maintain a positive attitude, to not let that bitterness come in, because that bitterness, no matter how justified it is, no matter how much you are right, no matter how much you got screwed, eventually Satan will figure out a way to turn that bitterness on your comrades. He will, right? The evil forces, the forces of evil, will turn that bitterness on your comrades, and you have to actively struggle and prevent that. Right? You have to actively say, I am not going to allow, right, the forces of evil to let me be bitter, because eventually that bitterness will be turned around and used on my comrades, right? And that will happen if you allow yourself to be bitter. You have to be in an active struggle to keep yourself from being bitter. So here we go. This is without the communists, there would be no new China. Is that what it's called? Right. This is one of my favorites. There you go. There you go. Listen to that was a very positive song, right? That song's not about resentment. That song's not about burn it down, tear it down. It's a very positive song. But this other song I want to put on for you. This is a great song. And this is my other favorite Chinese Communist song. And it's for a national holiday. In China, they have a holiday to honor Lei Fang. I don't know if you know who Lei Fang was. He was just a Chinese soldier. And he died. And when he died, they found his diary. And this guy was just filled with patriotism and loyalty to the country. He volunteered to help elderly people. He was a true communist in every sense of the word. And he died in a car accident. His car hit a telephone pole and he died. And so after he died, they made him kind of the model of an ideal communist, Lei Fang. And so they have a national holiday in China for Lei Fang. It's called Lei Fang Day. And on that day, the kids all volunteer. They clean the parks and all of that. And this is the song for Lei Fang Day. The lyrics of it are particularly good. So the English lyrics will be on the screen here. But here you go. Yeah, so those are my two favorite like Chinese communist songs. They're great, and both of them are very positive. But if you read Red Star Over China, which is Edgar Snow's book, Edgar Snow was the American journalist from Missouri, from the Missouri School of Journalism, who went and interviewed Mao. He described the Red Army camp where he interviewed Mao, and he said, he was in the mountains, he was in the middle of nowhere. And, he's in the mountains and suddenly he heard trumpets and he thought he must be hallucinating, because why would there be a trumpet right here, in the middle of the mountains? But he got to this camp in the middle of the mountains, and there were all these Chinese teenagers, Chinese people in their early 20s, and they were singing constantly. Like, there was not a moment where there wasn't singing going on, right? And they were constantly singing revolutionary songs, and there was just this upbeat attitude there all the time. And they just filled the air with these songs, right? Because they were, that was part of the revolutionary discipline, right? Is that these songs, they had taken Chinese folk songs, traditional melodies and tunes from China, and rewritten the words to be communist, kind of like what Joe Hill did, right? He took all the old Salvation Army songs, he rewrote them to be communist. Lei Feng Day is March 5th. Very good. And they filled the air with these songs so that people are walking around and they're singing revolutionary communist songs all the time. They're keeping an upbeat mood. Very beautiful. Very, very beautiful. And then on top of that, he talks about how when he interviewed Mao, and this is really fascinating to me. So finally, after he's been there for a little while, Edgar Snow gets to interview Mao Zedong, the leader of the Chinese Revolution. And Mao's wife is in the room. And so he starts asking Mao about, like, your childhood, tell me about your parents, tell me, how you became a communist, blah, blah, blah. Mao's wife looks up with intense interest, because she's never heard it before. Mao's wife had no idea about Mao's childhood, about Mao's background, no idea. Why? Because as a rule in the Red Army camp, you didn't talk about your old life. When you became a communist, it was considered you were reborn and you took on a new name. And as a rule, you did not talk about your old life. And so nobody knew anything about Mao's childhood, how Mao became a communist, because it was considered that you left all of that behind. You left your old life behind. You left whatever issues you had behind. You came to the Red Army camp. In the Red Army camp, you always sang. There was constant singing going on, and you had a new name and a new life, and that was the way Mao built the Chinese Communist Revolution, right? And that's the army that he built up, So think about that, right? Think about that, right? We think about all the bitterness that people have, all the bitterness and all the resentment and all the anger that people have, and how it gets turned on the people that they love the most. It gets turned on their spouses. It gets turned on their comrades. And think about the way that revolutionary movements of the past have worked to combat that bitterness, right? And give people a purpose, fill the air with joyful music and focus on communist ideology, chanting mantras. It's just something to think about that. Just something to think about. All right, folks, we got a few super chats. So I guess we'll do the roll call. And I will call you out as I see you. Names and locations. I will call you out as I see you. We'll find out who's on the other side of the camera, names and locations, and then I will start answering super chat questions for the rest of the night. So who's with us tonight? Names and locations. Who is with us? Who's with us? Names and locations. I will call you out as I see you. So we got John Whitty in Houston. We got Ryan in Oakland, Mike in North Carolina, St. David in Bermuda, Olivia in Kent, Jared in Virginia, Jim in Harrisburg, Jenny in Cincinnati. We got Philippines to Los Angeles, Steve, Ringgold, Georgia, Alan in Chicago, Heidi in Edinburgh, Scotland, the Philippines, Los Angeles, Alex from Brazil, Stephen Mitchell Paluzzo in Boston. We got Richard in the house, Featherston, New Zealand, Lori in Oklahoma. Wow. Nate in Chicago, West Virginia, Redneck Red, Russia, Juan from Ecuador, Edwin from the Philippines, Bob Troy from New York, Orange County, California, KCMO, Kansas City, Missouri, Christian in Iceland, Tyler out in Missouri, shout out to you, Liam in Auckland, Finn in Duluth, shout out to you, Finn, Troy in the Paris of the Plains, Patch in Arizona, welcome. I'm going to mod a few people. There's a few people that should be modded. I'm going to start modding people tonight, but anyway, maybe we'll do that later when we don't have all the names coming in. Abel from Milwaukee, Very, very good. Very, very good. Liam from Auckland, New Zealand. Cleveland Pirate Alex, longtime listener. Very, very good. Names and location. Mindanao to Midwest. Olympia Logic. Great friend of the show. I saw that in the chat. You're tweeting at Jimmy Dore or something. Crazy stuff. Kieran in San Diego. Los Angeles. Jonathan C. Jordan in Chicagoland. Gala. Love from Austin, Texas. Love back at you, Gala. CD from Malta. CD from Malta. John McCarthy in Chicago. John McCarthy in Chicago. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome. I think we'll mod you, Gala. Gala is now a moderator. You have been modded, Gala. Lori, I think Lori Spencer will make Lori. Oh, Lori's already a moderator. So there we go. But we need more mods here. Always good to have mods. And so, yeah, very good. John McCarthy in Chicago. Taylor Manis in St. Paul. St. Paul, I assume that's St. Paul, Minnesota. But what do I know? Could be somewhere else, right? Names and locations. Names and locations. Names and locations. All right. Balthazar in Oakland. All right. Very, very good. Very, very good. Very, very good. All right. So I guess, we got, what is it? Rice from Adelaide, Australia. We got FHL in Pennsylvania. Good stuff. Good stuff. All right. All right. So we're going to start answering super chat questions. Carl from Washington. All right. And if folks have more super chats, by all means, shoot them my way. All right. Why are some Americans quick to defend Cuba, but not North Korea? Culture. It's culture. It's the simple reason, right? That Cuba is culturally more like the United States, right? It was settled by Spaniards. It's a Mediterranean, Latin culture. And that's, it's closer to American culture, right? Whereas Koreans are in Asia, and they have a very different culture and history. And the way that they present and the way they explain themselves is very different. And also access, right? It's a lot easier to go to Cuba than it is to North Korea. But many people have pointed out that Cuba and North Korea have ultimately the same political and economic system. It's a one-party communist state, 5-year economic plans. It's really existing socialism. It's and Cuba has updated and North Korea has updated. But for the Cold War, they were, a Cold War really existing socialist country. And they had a charismatic leader of the party, Fidel Castro, Kim Il-sung. They were aligned with the Soviet Union. They had 5-year economic planning, industrialization. They both had their own version of Stakhanovism. It was very much your, really existing socialism, quote unquote, Stalinist, real socialism, 20th century socialism, whatever you want to call it. That's what it was. Now, Cuba has had market reforms. North Korea would like to have more market reforms. They've had some, but they would like to have more. But, and there's no reason, and Michael Parenti has pointed this out. If you like Cuba, you ought to like North Korea. You ought to like the Eastern European socialist states. But for some reason, a lot of leftist Americans could go to Cuba and admit it was good, or there were good things about it, but just hated all the other countries. And it doesn't logically compute. The most blatant example of this weird double standard that we've seen among American communists is the American Socialist Workers Party, the SWP, the big Trotskyite party in the 60s and 70s. They exist now, but they're very, very small. But in the 70s, they were a huge organization. They had the militant newspaper. They were the Trotskyist party in America. And they came to the conclusion, I kid you not, it is beyond me. They came to the conclusion that the Cuban Revolution, they were unconscious Trotskyites. That's what they said, that they were unconscious Trotskyites. And that is the most ridiculous position, right? Do they really think that Fidel Castro and Che Guevara and Raul Castro were just so stupid that they agreed with Trotskyism? They just didn't realize it. I think Fidel Castro knew that he wasn't no Trotskyite. I think Che Guevara knew that he wasn't no Trotskyite. I think that, I think that they were smart enough to realize that they were not Trotskyites. They knew they weren't Trotskyites. But it's like, how can Cuba be good but still have the Marxist-Leninist ideology, still have the same ideology as the Eastern Bloc. Oh, they must be unconscious Trotskyites. That is a ridiculous position, and it's very condescending, honestly. It's very, and you see that a lot, that American communists assume they know better, right? They assume that they know better, right? Vietnam can't be socialist. China can't be socialist. I'm an American in the center of an empire where we get a distorted view of Marxism pumped at us by academia that's basically, co-opted by the CIA. But I know Marxism better than the people who've actually had a revolution against the imperialists and created this. This is a really common theme, is I know better. What is interesting is there was, and I think it still exists, there was a Trotskyite faction in Cuba that was legal. And I'm trying to look up, there was a woman who was the leader of it. And I can't remember her name. But there was a Trotskyist, like legal Trotskyist faction in Cuba. And there was a woman who was the leader of it. She died, but they had an office, they had a headquarters. There was like a Trotskyist group in Cuba. And because so many Trotskyists around the world were sympathetic to Cuba, I think the Cuban government felt like it was necessary to allow some kind of organized expression of Trotskyism in Cuba. And there was, I'm Googling it. I'm trying to find it. There was a legal, like, Trotskyist organization in Cuba at one point. And the woman who was the leader of it, I can't remember her name, but she died, and she was the leader, of Trotskyism in Cuba. She was a member of one of the Fourth Internationals. And I cannot for the life of me remember her name. But there you go. What was her name? And she was the leader of it, and it was like a legal Trotskyite organization in Cuba, and that does exist. The other thing that's important to note is that, and this is wild, but the Posadists, people like to make fun of this obscure, the current unrest in China re-lockdown, calling for the president to be kicked out. The obscure Trotskyist grouping called the Posadists. They were based out of Argentina. Their leader was Luis Posada. They believed in like UFOs and all of that. At one point, they were in Cuba, and they were getting training in Cuba, and they started attacking foreign embassies in Cuba in the hopes of provoking a third world war based on their UFO beliefs. And that was a moment where a lot of people said that this is some CIA manipulation. But you can read about the Posadaists when they were in Cuba, and they started attacking foreign embassies in Cuba. And yeah, I mean, there's an article, 5 Trotskyites arrested in Cuba, from the New York Times, 1964. And I think it's about this, right? 5 Trotskyites arrested in Cuba, 1964, July 13th, New York Times. 5 Cuban Trotskyites, including their movement's leader, have been arrested by the Castro government, prompting Trotskyite charges of Stalin. The British Trotskyite organ Red Flag reported that Andres Alfonso, a transport worker, has been sentenced to 5 years in prison. As if they care, right? As if the New York Times, Juan Posadas, Argentine leader, one of the 3 main groups into which the World Trotsky movement is split, has charged that the arrests reflect the Soviet bureaucracy and its pressure on the Castro regime. This is hilarious, right? I mean, and they're quoting Luis Posadas as like an expert. Don't you love it? This is like when the New York Times runs an article like young Marxist elected, or young Marxist arrested in China. Like the ruling ideology of China is Marxism. So like someone in China who is arrested believing in Marxism is like, that would be like, capitalist arrested in America. Oh, America, they're not real capitalists. They arrested a capitalist in America. It's a meaningless thing. But yeah, the New York Times, 1964, writes about 5 Trotskyites were arrested. They're quoting the leader of Argentine Trotskyism, Posadas, right? But there you go. But who was the woman? There was this woman that was a leader of Cuban Trotskyists for a long time. And they legally functioned, and they were like part of the Cuban government for a while. I can't remember her name, but there you go. But yeah, this double standard where it's like Cuba is special, but all the other socialist countries are not. Why did the USA never have a Labor Party like UK? All right. Very, very good question. All right. All right. Why does China seem to have faint support for North Korea? Well, I don't think that's accurate. I don't think it's accurate that they have faint support. I mean, China does support North Korea. Mao's own son died in the Korean War. There were many thousands of Chinese people who gave their lives to defend North Korea. China continues to do business with North Korea. China does support the sanctions on North Korea because of the fact that China and Russia and most of the major countries support the nuclear non-proliferation treaty that North Korea had signed the nuclear non-proliferation treaty, and then they withdrew from the nuclear non-proliferation treaty. And if the nuclear non-proliferation treaty goes away, at that point, any country with nuclear weapons can give nuclear weapons to any of their allies. And that would be a disaster, right? The USA would then give nukes to all of their allies. And then Russia and China would be forced to give nukes to all of their allies. And then there's nuclear weapons floating around all over the world. And that's a nightmare. The way the nuclear non-proliferation treaty has worked, some countries have nukes and they can keep them, and other countries cannot get nukes. And the nuclear non-proliferation treaty, which Israel has never signed, right? Which every other Middle Eastern country is a signatory of. Israel has never signed it. If the nuclear non-proliferation treaty just evaporates, then we have a nuclear arms race that's very dangerous for the world. We saw the Trump administration rip up and withdraw from a number of nuclear arms treaties with Russia. So it wouldn't be a good thing for the world if the nuclear non-proliferation treaty went away. So Russia and China have to punish North Korea for proliferating nuclear weapons because they have to support the nuclear non-proliferation treaty. If they did not put sanctions on North Korea for getting nukes, at that point, that essentially means that the nuclear non-proliferation treaty is null and void. At which point, then the USA starts giving nukes to everybody. And then they have to then start giving nukes to all of their friends. And then there's nuclear weapons floating around everywhere. And there's an international arms race. And that can't happen. So that's why China, they can't be completely solid with North Korea. But they are very friendly with North Korea. They have a good relationship. There's an economic relationship. Russia is very friendly with North Korea as well. It's something that, again, North Korea needs to give up their nuclear weapons. And they will at some point. They just need to get reassurance that they won't be invaded, that Russia and China will have their back. And there needs to be an agreement with the United States that they will lift sanctions. So there you go. So there you go. All right. Between Two Ages by Brzezinski. Well, I have that book right here. Right. And if you read this book, right, Between Two Ages, America's Role in the Technotronic Era. It's by Zbigniew Brzezinski. And he publishes it, in the middle of it's like 1969, 1970. He publishes this book representing the anti-communist school of Columbia University. And basically he talks about how the world is changing. He says the world is changing as a result of the 1960s, the world is changing as the result of access to information with television, with gradually we're starting to see, computer technology emerging. We're starting to see that the world is changing, right? And as a result of the world changing, people want different things. Religion is being more widely questioned. People are being more independent minded. And the world is changing. And at the time, right, there was a big anti-war protest movement in the United States. You had the hippies, the counterculture. And the right wing and a lot of the American political establishment thought these people are communists. They're soft on communism. This represents a threat to our American way of life. Brzezinski looks at the emerging hippie movement and says, no, these people aren't communists. This isn't the 1930s. They're not motivated by economic anger. They're not motivated by class struggle. They don't have deep roots among the masses. This is a reaction to access to information. These younger people are able to get their hands on new ideas. They're being more open-minded. They're questioning authority. And the culture globally is changing because of access to information. That's technotronic era. That's what he's arguing, that we're entering an era where information is more widely spread. And he argues that the world is being gradually Americanized because America, the United States, has kind of a monopoly, where it dominates the television networks and such, and it dominates the means of spreading information. The world is being Americanized, and the culture is changing. And what's called the New Left is not a communist revolution. It's not a threat of communist revolution. It's actually just the culture changing. And rather than fighting the New Left and fighting the hippies, we can hijack and take control of this cultural shift happening because of the access to information and use it against the Soviet Union. And that's what he says in the book, very blatantly. He doesn't, he says it in kind of a roundabout way, but basically the message of the book, the message of the book is that that the cultural movement that caused the 1960s political upsurge, young people opposing Cold War conformity, it's not a threat of communist revolution, and actually it can be turned around to hurt the Soviet Union. And he talks about how access to education in the third world is leading to communist uprisings. That people in the third world are getting education, and that's making them more frustrated about the underdevelopment of their countries. He compares the Black community he writes about what he calls the global ghettos, and he refers to Africa and impoverished countries around the world as the global ghettos. And he talks about how the U.S. government has managed the Black community and manipulated the Black community, and funded Black nationalists to fight communists and different activities they've done to manipulate the Black community. And he says that can be used to manipulate third world national liberation struggles. So it's Zbigniew Brzezinski basically putting forward the Cold War liberalism strategy, hijack the changes in the culture and use it against the Soviet Union. And he points out the Soviet Union has a very conservative edge to it. He points out there's a lot of unhappy young intellectuals in the Soviet Union. It lays out the whole color revolution strategy. It all comes through in that book. That book lays out the strategies of the more effective evil, right? The more effective wing of American imperialism that said, rather than fight communism, let's create a bunch of confusion. Let's hijack the information revolution. Let's make American culture seem so sexy and amazing, right? And let's use the information technology and the information warfare to manipulate the young people of the world that are frustrated with the conservatism of their parents, and we'll bring down the Soviet Union. That's what he says. And he even goes as far as saying that they don't want to overthrow socialism in the Soviet Union. They just support the democratic socialists' opposition. I mean, it's really blatant. He really spells it out, and that basically the CIA needs to support the New Left, and he basically spells it out. So there you go. That's my thoughts on that book. And I quote it a lot in the upcoming book. I'm working on a book, and I'm quoting that a lot. Is Taiwan the second election that Nancy Pelosi has lost this month? I would say so. The people of Taiwan have voted overwhelmingly for the KMT Nationalist Party, which is a party that recognizes Taiwan as part of China, and it has a better relationship with the Chinese Communist Party. This is the irony of history. The KMT was Chiang Kai-shek's party, right? And Chiang Kai-shek was Mao's enemy. And Chiang Kai-shek was driven off the Chinese mainland by Mao. But now the KMT is the more pro-Chinese mainland party because they recognize Taiwan as part of China. And the DPP, the Democratic Progressive Party, they are the more anti-China mainland party that's tied in with separatism and Taiwan independence and separatism. So, the KMT party that has been winning a lot, Chiang Kai-shek's grandson is now the mayor of a city and such. This shows that, again, alliances change, right? Who would have thought that the people on the island of Taiwan would be supporting the KMT, which used to be like the one-party authoritarian dictatorship, because of the fact that this DPP, this sexy new woke new left party backed by the United States, is more anti-China and pushing to World War III. But this shows that things change. The KMT and Chiang Kai-shek, that used to be where the World Anti-Communist League was headquartered, right? And that used to be Taiwan, used to be like funneling guns and weapons to anti-communists and fascists all over the world. But now the KMT, they're the party that wants to get along with China. So politics changes. It's just like how now Republicans are less pro-war than Democrats are, right? You know, and politics is constantly changing. Alliances constantly change, right? And the KMT now is the more pro-Chinese mainland party. All right, next question. Isabel dos Santos, and what has she done? Well, I'm going to do a whole thing on her. I'm still doing research. I'm going to talk to you all about her pretty soon because I have a lot to say about Isabel dos Santos. But long story short, Isabel dos Santos is the daughter of the revolutionary leader who was the leader of Angola's national liberation struggle. And she ran the state-run oil company of Angola, Sonangol. And when she was ousted by the new president, when her father retired and they elected a new president from the MPLA party, when she was ousted, it was very clear to me she was ousted for being anti-imperialist. She wouldn't privatize the natural gas. She maintained state ownership of natural gas. She required American oil companies who do business in Angola to purchase products from Angolan companies domestically. She enforced environmental laws, and that when she was ousted, the U.S. business press cheered. They hated her. But when she was running she was playing a big role in Angola's economy. She presided over some of the biggest economic growth rates in world history at that point. 2002, Angola got its independence in 1975. The MPLA was the communist revolutionary group that was fighting the Portuguese colonialists. 1975, Portugal, they had the fascist government fell, and so they granted independence to all of their colonies, including Angola. So Angola got its independence. MPLA became the new, government. Immediately, the United States started funding UNITA, which was at first calling itself a Maoist group. But then in the 80s, they just became advocates of Western capitalism. And they were this violent terrorist extremist group. It was led by a guy who was a literal cannibal named Jonas Savimbi. And they were just this awful, extreme, violent terrorist group backed by the United States that killed people, etc. Right? It was awful, right? I have no idea. What are the Gotland? I have no idea about that, Charlie. Can't do your homework for you. Sorry. They were backing this horrendous group called UNITA. In 2002, they finally, from 1975 to 2002, there was civil war in Angola with the United States backing, UNITA, the terrorists. Finally, in 2002, they had peace. And from 2002 until the 2014 oil price drop, Angola had some of the highest economic growth rates in the world. The highest economic growth rates in the world. And Luanda, the capital city of Angola, really expanded. Sorry, Charlie, I didn't mean to be rude to you. I don't know about these Gotland Islands, and I can't comment on that. But Cuba sent its military to support Angola. That's true. When apartheid South Africa invaded Angola in the 80s, and there's still Cuban military there. Cuba and Angola have a very close relationship. And from 2002 until 2014, there was a huge amount of economic expansion in Angola. And it was Isabel dos Santos who was doing it. I mean, they have their own cell phone company. She gave thousands and thousands of people their first job. She brought in China to build infrastructure, to build new highways. People were being raised out of poverty. Angola was doing a lot of good shit during those years. But then the oil price dropped in 2014, right? And oil is what they have in Angola. They got a lot of oil. And so immediately with the oil price drop, then all of a sudden everyone starts talking about corruption. So they have accused Isabel of corruption now. She was fired as the state-run oil company's head, right, when the new president came in. And the U.S. media was just immediately cheering and going after her, right? And so I immediately spoke up on her defense. I could see what was going on. So then the Panama Papers came out and they tried this corruption bullshit. Oh, she's corrupt, and they tried that bullshit. So now they have basically forced her into hiding, right? She's banned from entering the United States. She's banned from Portugal. She's banned from Angola, and she's in hiding. Basically, because of the fact that the U.S. imperialists want to make sure that she's never in government again, right? Her assets have been frozen, and she's in hiding. But from an undisclosed location, she recently gave an interview announcing that she's considering a presidential run because she's popular, because people remember when she was running the economy of Angola, how good the economy was. It was very, very good. And she presided over economic growth, and she helped people in Angola. She raised a lot of people out of poverty. She made a huge effort to empower young women and to encourage young women to be entrepreneurs. Isabel dos Santos, she is an anti-imperialist. She loves her people. She loves Russia. She loves China. She's very proud of the national liberation struggle. She's a socialist. And she was doing her job and making sure that the economic growth in Angola benefited the people of Angola. And for that, she's been, forced out of office. She's been forced into exile. Now she's in hiding. But she is saying that she could win the elections, right? She could actually win the elections. She's announced she's considering a presidential run. And I have been pro Isabel dos Santos from the beginning. And these kind of people are very important, right? You talk about Isabel dos Santos, you talk about Jack Ma, these kind of people that are wealthy leaders of anti-imperialism, right? People that are leaders of anti-imperialist states that have gotten wealthy from an anti-imperialist economy, right? And then get targeted and accused of corruption and all of that by the imperialists. These are like city builders, right? She's a city builder if there ever was one. Isabel dos Santos is a city builder. They hate her. They want her to never be in government again. They are just trying to, destroy her. I mean, they have really gone out. They do not want her to be back in. And at the end of the day, they're trying to destroy the legacy of her father. Her father, who recently died, he died like 3 months ago. Her father was a guerrilla fighter who was aligned with Cuba, who defeated UNITA and was the leader of the communist revolution, and they're trying to destroy that legacy. They want socialism in Angola to be meaningless, right? They want to completely, they want Angola to just be one of these third world countries that's technically socialist, but not really. Well, it's not. I mean, Angola, the economic foundations of socialism are there. State-owned oil company, state-owned, industries. The Cubans are there. Like Angola, the foundations are socialist. But right now they have revisionist leaders. The current president of the MPLA is a revisionist. He is somebody who's in the pocket of the United States and is trying to dismantle socialism in Angola. And if you look at their recent election, UNITA, the opposition party, they're not an armed terrorist group anymore. Now they're an opposition party. They did the best they've ever done. And the MPLA is still the ruling party. But their votes, the amount of votes they got was like the lowest they've ever gotten in an election. Why? Because the policies that made them popular, the socialist policies, are not being implemented anymore. The population is not getting, what they want. And the MPLA, has been kind of infiltrated. The pro-US wing of the MPLA is running the MPLA, and it's hurting the MPLA, and it's strengthening UNITA, which is worse than the MPLA. They're the pro-imperialist opposition party, and the MPLA is supposed to be the socialist anti-imperialist party, but now the pro-imperialist wing of it seems to have taken control. So Isabel dos Santos, if she were to run for president of Angola, I think she could win because she's what they're proud of. She's the legacy of her father, who is her father was a Che Guevara. All right. Her father was a Che Guevara. And I'm going to do a whole stream on this. I'm gathering material. I've got videos of her and stuff. I'm not ready to do that yet. So this is like a preview of what you're going to hear from me later. But I am a huge admirer of Isabel dos Santos. I've never met her. I hope I can meet her someday. And I hope that she becomes president of Angola because she is the legacy of the heroic anti-colonial struggle there. And that's why the U.S. imperialists are determined to make sure that she's not allowed to be in Angolan politics. And whenever they start running this line, oh, they're corrupt. The U.S. imperialists are the most corrupt people in the world, right? I mean, they bombed the shit out of Iraq and killed millions of people. And lied about weapons of mass destruction. I mean, so it's like, yes, when countries are rising up out of poverty and they have state-run economies, there's going to be contracts handed out. There's going to be nepotism, and all corruption is bad. All right. Any corruption is bad. And I'm not here to defend corruption. But Isabel dos Santos is on the right side of history. She's a city builder. She is a socialist and an anti-imperialist. And because of that, the U.S. imperialists have just gone all in against her. And even amid all of that, even amid the fact that she's in hiding right now, Like, no one knows where she is. She was in Dubai for a while, and now that's been, she's not in Dubai anymore, I guess. And she can't go to her home country of Angola. She can't go to Portugal where she used to live. She's in hiding. Despite all of that, right? Isabel is saying that she wants to run for president of Angola. And I think she could win. So there you go, right? I think if the balance of forces shifts, there's enough people in the Angolan government who don't like neoliberalism and would vote for her. And remember how much of an effective hero of the country her father was, and how much of a good, economist she is, and how effective her economic policies were. I like Isabel dos Santos. I really do. So there you go. All right. Russian mutiny. I haven't seen those reports. I can't comment on it. I just haven't seen it. So again, there's a lot of fake news and stuff, but that might be true. I don't know. I haven't looked into it. I haven't been following that today. All right. Now, John McCarthy wanted me to announce the all-day telethon for the Uhuru movement starts at 7 a.m. tomorrow Central. It'll be on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. Got to support the Uhuru movement. They are under attack by the American government, raided by the FBI, called Russian agents. Got to stand with them. It was an honor to have them at the CPI conference in Chicago. Good folks. So stand with the Uhuru movement. All right. Current unrest in China. Well, look, there's going to be disagreements in a country that has billions of people, that has 1 billion people in it. But whatever disagreements there are, the U.S. imperialists are going to try to manipulate it. They're going to try to manipulate it. They're going to try to, manipulate it for their own ends. And so, I'll be listening to hear what Nathan Rich and other experts who are there on the ground can say about it. But I don't trust anything I hear in American media. Nothing. And why is it that these people that are supposedly protesting lockdowns in China, that's okay. But anyone who protested lockdowns in America, oh my God, you're a Trump supporter. You're a Nazi. And it's like, but U.S. media loves the anti-lockdown protesters in China. That already is a hint that the U.S. the lockdown protesters in China ain't good. So there you go. Why does the USA not have a labor party like the UK? Well, the main reason, I would argue, is because of the fact that the U.S. Constitution, the way we're set up in the United States, it's a two-party system. When the Republican Party started as a third party, the Whig Party basically collapsed. So the Republican Party could be the new second party. The way the U.S. system is set up, you can only have two parties, right? If the Electoral College vote is split three ways, then Congress gets to decide, right? You have to have a clear majority in the Electoral College. The elections are regional, and they are first past the post. We don't have proportional representation. The U.S. system is not a parliamentary system, right? We have a Congress, a legislature. We have the Senate, and we have the House of Representatives. And, the representatives in the House of Representatives and the senators are both the people who win the majority vote in their district or in their state, if they're a senator. It's set up so it's very hard to have third parties. So socialism in the United States has always tended to express itself within one of the two parties. So there's that. Then on top of that, you have to add that, that the Socialist Party of America was crushed after World War I. There was a huge socialist party. Eugene Debs ran in elections and stuff. They didn't have, national seats in Congress or anything like that, but they had people in the legislatures around the country. They got at least almost 1 million votes in the 1912 presidential election. But after World War I, or during World War I, the U.S. government forcibly stamped out the Socialist Party. Whereas in most European countries, the socialist parties remained intact. They just became pro-imperialist. But in the United States, the Socialist Party, because it wasn't as built in, like the labor movement in the United States was weak, and it wasn't as integrated into the political system, instead of allowing the Socialist Party to flourish and just be a pro-imperialist party, the government saw that the Socialist Party of Eugene Debs was still, a genuine socialist party, was still opposing the war, and so they smashed it. They smashed the Socialist Party. And then when it came back after World War I, it was significantly weakened, and all the revolutionaries joined the Communist Party. So the Socialist Party, World War I was kind of the end of the Socialist Party of America. The Socialist Party of America was the Second International Party of America. That was the American Labor Party or whatever, but it never got fully integrated into the political system. In Britain, the Labor Party It was originally part of the Liberal Party. You had the Liberal Party in Britain, and then the Liberal Party split, and you had the Labour Party. And the Labour Party was the political party that was the expression of labor unions. Like the way the Labour Party's constitution is set up, labor unions elect delegates, right? The labor unions in Britain were strong enough that the way British imperialism was set up, and the Labour Party supported World War I. And, it was just the labor unions were big enough in Britain that the imperialists said, okay, we're going to integrate the labor union leadership and the Labor Party into our political system. That never happened in the United States. The labor unions here were not strong enough. We didn't really have a big, strong industrial union movement in the United States until the 1930s. But Britain had a much longer history of labor organizing, back to the Chartists. That was the first working class movement in the world, was the Chartist movement in Britain. So that's why, and there's an essay by Frederick Engels, why the USA does not have a strong socialist party, but that's written like in the 1800s, right? He's talking about how the accessibility of new land as the USA expands westward, that's part of it. The fact that the USA is a nation of immigrants, there's a language barrier, and there's a division between the workers that are born here and the foreign born, the homesteading and the pioneering and getting new land. But that's all very outdated, right? That's Frederick Engels writing, at like during the U.S. Civil War. He's writing like, why isn't there a big socialist group in America? He's writing that during the U.S. Civil War. But the main reason that we don't have a party in government like the UK Labour Party is because of the way the U.S. electoral system is set up, and also because the Second International Party in America never was allowed to fully integrate into the government apparatus. It was just smashed. Instead of becoming a pro-war party like the German Social Democrats or the UK Labour Party, when the war started, it remained anti-war, but it was small enough they could just smash it in the context of World War I. So there you go. All right. I guess this is where we'll end it for tonight. It's been fun. We'll be back tomorrow. A new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression, but the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. Good night.